Number 5. The training is brutal. When you were young, did you ever dream of being an astronaut? I think most of us did. You know, dreaming of being a cosmic sailor soaring through the Milky Way. I know I certainly did. I thought about how I'd ace the training. I'd be the perfect astronaut. I'd be this golden-haired hero of space, like a Luke Skywalker or a guy on an old pulp novel cover or something. Well, the movies and the media makes being an astronaut out to being a lot more glamorous and a lot easier than it is. I mean, we saw Homer Simpson do it and we figured we all could. But the truth is, they really do not take just about anybody. You already need to be a brilliant scientist and have an exceptional, spotless military career. So they're not just taking anybody, they are taking the best of the best of the best, the top 1% of the 1%. And they need people who can withstand incredible tolls on their body and are able to handle any problem that could be thrown their way in space. Turns out going to space, not that easy. These physical tasks include things like wilderness survival training, spending days surviving alone in the wilds on the off chance that your ship crashes on re-entry in the middle of nowhere and you need to be able to fend for yourself before rescue comes. As well, training includes things like swimming laps in a 200-pound spacesuit or spending literally 24 hours in a row submerged underwater to stimulate the feeling of floating around in a giant suit. Or how about taking a trip on the infamous Vomit Comet, the plane that flies in parabolas to induce weightlessness and zero gravity to get your body used to floating around before you do it for real, and more often than not has astronauts tasting what they had for lunch one more time. That's about the most pleasant way I can think to say that. That doesn't quite sound like the fun, carefree adventure I dreamed of as a kid. And if you're looking for more scary stories, strange space stories, UFO sightings, we have got plenty of that and way more on Top 5 Scary. Plus, just about everything scary you could ever think of above the sun and below it. So tap that bell and stay subscribed and don't miss a single scream. Number 4, it destroys your body. Even if you are one of those best of the best of the best who can handle the brutal training that thins out the herd, once you actually do get up into space properly, just existing ravages your body in all sorts of fun, terrifying ways you've never thought of. When you think about it, we really are not meant to be up in that environment. It's kind of like a fish trying to survive on land. So it's not much of a surprise that our body kind of reacts violently poorly to the new conditions. Here's a terrible one I bet you didn't know about. I bet you didn't know that astronauts' gloves are so tight and sealed that when they take them off, I'm actually gonna gag, astronauts lose their fingernails. They get pulled like right off, and frequently they break and sprain their fingers just taking their gloves off. Or maybe you didn't know that most astronauts, after entering zero gravity for the first time, vomit almost immediately, even if they've had tons of training and simulator experience. And this is not made better at all because, you know, where is that vomit going? It's just floating around you for everyone to see. Literally just being alive in space is bad for your body. You can just be sitting, vibing by the window, and it's going to do damage to you. Astronauts who spend extended time in a space station report a huge loss of bone density, reporting horrible creaking and pains. They even shrink a little bit. Some astronauts note that when they got back to Earth, their spine had to straighten back out in an incredibly painful process. But when asked what the worst part of space life is, one astronaut, Tim Peake, responded saying, "It's watching the soles of your feet disintegrate." I am going to do my level best to explain this next thing to you without vomiting, but I cannot promise anything. He described that because astronauts use their feet so rarely in space, their soles start to soften like a newborn baby's. And the feet gradually force off all the dead skin and calluses that you build up over a lifetime of walking. Meaning sometimes astronauts, when they remove their socks, shower the cabin with a lifetime of dead skin flakes and big chunks of foot floating around the space station like the literal most disgusting snow globe imaginable. Number 3, and your mental too. The thing is, it's not just your body that is going to be put through the absolute ringer when you find yourself with a career floating up in the stars. Your mental faculties need to be sharper than anyone and able to deal with anything that could possibly get thrown at you as you're floating up miles away from home. It's no wonder David Bowie and Elton John wrote so many songs about how sad it is to be up in space. Astronauts report feeling a wide array of mental health struggles, reporting that the isolation causes them loneliness, depression, anxiety, stress, fatigue, mood swings, concentration issues, and some even getting full-blown PTSD upon returning back to the Earth. But, I mean, I get it. Imagine the workload. Imagine working a grueling day, not just any regular day. A day where if your work goes wrong, you could lead to one of or many of your teammates' deaths, and then having to go to sleep in a cold space station away from your loved ones and do that over and over again for 100 days straight. Imagine you have a bad day at work in space. You can't even go home about it. You gotta go home to space. Sleeping on a space station is far from a cozy night in a crib either. For one, there's constant noise all around you on a space station. Nobody can hear you scream in space, that much is true, but everybody can hear all the engines and computers and all that stuff going off inside the space station, meaning there's never a quiet moment. It's also not as dark as you might hope. Not only do you have to deal with the fact that your sleep cycle is no longer tied to the sunrise and sunset anymore, because you're going to see about 16 of those a day, but you have to tend with flashing lights all over the station from the machinery, but as well lights that are thought to be caused by cosmic rays passing through your eyelids. As well, there's also, no gravity. They definitely tell you that. Imagine having to tie yourself to a wall to avoid bumping your head around a cabin while you're just trying to get your 8 hours and a little REM time. Number 2, brown trout and recycling. Okay. This is going to be the grossest part of the list by far. If you want to skip right ahead to number 1, I get it. There's a reason I put this at number 2, and you'll all understand in a second. Just know I'm a child and I have the sense of humor of an 8-year-old. When you compare all the physical and mental danger astronauts have to face, is going to the toilet scarier than the risk of death? It honestly sounds like it. Peggy Whitson is an astronaut who holds a ton of records. Foremost, she's got the record for the most time spent in space, spending nearly 2 full years in orbit. She's spoken out and said that her least favorite part of living in space is the bathroom. Now, number 1 is considered to be a little easier, but it does not sound enjoyable in any way. A little hose, you attach it and it sucks the urine out, and then a machine converts that into drinking water because, yeah, astronauts drink a lot of their own pee. Now, admittedly, it's heavily processed, okay? You're not getting it out of the water cooler, it's not coming out yellow. But on a spaceship, water is sacred. Much like the still suits of Arrakis, all liquids and fluids are recycled. The water you wash your hands with, excrete, or spit out brushing your teeth, all of that is collected, processed, recycled to be drank again. Try not to think about that too much. Every astronaut you've ever seen on the news has drank so much pee. Astronauts have to fill a glorified porta potty pit and then put on a special rubber glove and pack it down nice and compact to be processed. But in zero gravity, things happen, and more often than any astronaut would ever care to admit, sometimes the mission goes a bit bad. Chris Hadfield said his crew would refer to these incidents as brown trouts. I'm not going to explain it. I think you understand. Leroy Chow, retired astronaut, spoke on his time on the station and said sternly that everyone cleans up their own mess when it happens, but he didn't elaborate on what that meant, but you can read through the lines pretty easy. When you were a little kid dreaming about life in space, did you ever consider that the world's best and brightest minds would be putting on the poop glove to catch brown trouts? And I am so sorry for the mental image I have given you. Number 1, danger. And above all else, if it hasn't been made exceedingly clear yet in this video, the life of an astronaut is not an easy one and oftentimes is extremely dangerous, with anything being able to go wrong spelling a certain disaster. Everything needs to be perfect. Now, you could look up countless stories of astronauts in danger, but I'm going to share one from Chris Hadfield because he's a Canadian icon. He spoke to BuzzFeed News about how on his first flight ever, he and fellow astronauts had to navigate a $250,000 space station towards a target the size of a coffee cup on the Russian Mir space station. Hadfield was there to relay the speed and range information to the pilot as they were pulling in for a docking maneuver, which had to be incredibly precise. In Hadfield's own words, if you hit the Mir too soft, the spring mechanisms bounce you off. If you hit the mirror just a little bit too hard, well, then you risk breaking the station in half and ending the lives of everybody on board. So you've got to hit it exactly right. No pressure or anything. When the shuttle crew was about 30 feet away, two sensors started telling them two different things. One of them said that they were at 32 feet away, and the other one said 20 feet away. Hadfield said, "They're either both wrong or one of them is completely wrong. Now what do? There's nobody to ask, and if the crew on board this shuttle doesn't solve this problem in the next 30 seconds, then this is it for everybody." Hadfield described using his thumb to try and measure the distance from the window. This told him they were about 21 feet away, and he used a stopwatch to try and do the math to figure out how fast they were going, and when they should fire thrusters. And well, like since I mentioned, Chris Hadfield is a national hero and not a national tragedy, we know they did end up hitting the target at the correct speed, even with 3 seconds to spare. Hadfield said the shuttle crew didn't even say a word until a few minutes after, when the shock had finally worn off, and one of the members of the crew said, "Hey, we did it, we're actually here." It goes to show that astronauts need to be razor sharp to be able to think on the fly like that, and really do need to be the best of the best to handle what they do up there. So maybe it's good I didn't end up being an astronaut and I'm just a horror YouTuber. I'm sure you guys all appreciate that way more.
Number 5. Aliens on the Sun? In December 1995, the joint NASA-ESA Solar and Heliospheric Observatory Mission, or SOHO for short, was launched in an effort to study the Sun so that we could learn more about it. SOHO has allowed us to study the Sun inside out, helping us to learn about its internal structure, its extensive outer atmosphere, and the powerful solar winds that blow across our solar system. SOHO was integral in proving once and for all that the Sun does not in fact wear a giant pair of sunglasses, as has been implied by several children's art projects. SOHO captures images across several different spectrums of light, most of which are then made available for public consumption on the internet. Most of these images are pretty innocuous, but sometimes someone will see something that can't be explained, proving that sometimes staring at the Sun can be beneficial. A UFO enthusiast was looking at the photos of the Sun and noticed a black square of the photo cut out. At first, he thought it was a technical issue, until he looked into it more. Here's the story as he related it. On June 28th, I found what looked like a mistake in the photo, but looks more like a black cube that is in orbit around our Sun. Sure, one photo mistake, right? Wrong. NASA and SOHO have the most advanced telescopic equipment available. For a cube to be missing from the photo, either it was cut out by NASA to hide something, or is it a flying cube in orbit around the Sun? Crazy? I think not. How often do you look directly at the Sun? Never, because it will damage your eyes. So it would go unnoticed. However, scientists around the world have stated there are UFOs orbiting the Sun many times larger than the Earth. I have recorded 3 instances of this cube flying around in different positions this month. For a long time, it was assumed that these squares were simply a computer glitch. But 4 years later, the squares showed up in a photo again. But the idea that this was a technical issue was called into question when separate UFO enthusiasts came forward with photos from a different SOHO camera that showed the square in the same spot. Is there a cube-shaped UFO orbiting the Sun? Or is NASA editing out something from the photos before releasing them? If there is something there, what are they trying to accomplish by hiding it? Number 4. Neil Armstrong's alien encounter. On July 20th, 1969, history was made as the Apollo 11 lunar module landed on the Moon, allowing its crew members, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, to become the first humans to ever walk on the Moon. It was a landmark day for humanity, and Neil's first steps on the Moon were broadcast on television, where it was witnessed by over 650 million viewers. During his moonwalk, he had access to 2 radio channels. One that would let everything he said be broadcast both to television and mission control, and another that would allow him to speak only to mission control. At some point in the moonwalk, Armstrong switched over to his private channel. When asked in later years why he had switched to his private channel and what was said, Armstrong said, "I have no comment on that. and am uncomfortable discussing the topic in any further detail. During the time that the radio communication was unavailable to the public, several amateur ham radio enthusiasts managed to tune in to the private channel. The following quotes from the incident have been corroborated by hundreds of unrelated operators who were all tuned in at the time. I say that there were other spaceships. Those are giant things. No, 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 this is not an optical illusion. No one is going to believe this. They're here, under the surface. We saw some visitors. They were here for a while, observing the instruments. I say that there were other spaceships. They're lined up in the other side of the crater. My hands are shaking so badly, I can't do anything. Film it. God, if these cameras have picked up anything, what then? I didn't have any film at hand. 3 shots of the saucers, or whatever they were, that were ruining the film. They've landed here. There they are, and they're watching us. In the years since, this was denied by Armstrong and NASA, but Buzz Aldrin did say there was at one point an unknown object tracing their path to the moon. Were some of the over 650 million beings watching the moon landing visitors from another world? We may never know for sure. Number 3. NASA cutting the live feed. Another of NASA's crown jewels is the International Space Station, which, as the name suggests, was built with the collaboration of other countries in an effort to collect data and therefore raise our understanding of the universe and our place in it. The International Space Station broadcasts a live stream that anyone on the internet can watch. But sometimes the feed is lost. Sometimes this feed going down feels somewhat convenient. On July 9th, 2016, the live feed showed a bright glowing object falling into view of the camera. Just as the object is about to get into a more viewable position, the feed dropped, and a message came on screen claiming that technical issues had caused the feed to cut out. One YouTuber grabbed the footage and uploaded it. In the caption of the video, he states that it wasn't necessarily an alien craft and very well could have been a meteor, but the fact that the feed was cut just before the camera could broadcast a clear look was inherently suspicious. A spokesperson for NASA came forward, saying the feed being cut was not a deliberate act, explaining that the station regularly passes out of range of the tracking and data relay satellites used to send and receive video, and telemetry from the station. For video, whenever we lose signal, the cameras will show a blue screen or a preset video slate. This explanation, of course, did little to appease the people of the internet, who had already decided that the feed was cut in an intentional effort to prevent the regular people of Earth from learning about visitors from another planet. But as far as explanations from government agency goes, this is one of the better ones I've heard. Number 2. The MJ-12 documents. When John F. Kennedy was made President of the United States in 1960, he quickly developed a reputation of not being a fan of the intelligence community. He believed that certain information should be shared with the people they were governing, and perhaps even more surprisingly, felt that some information should be shared with their Soviet counterparts in the interest of developing a relationship and de-escalating the Cold War in the aftermath of the Cuban Missile Crisis. He apparently drafted and sent a memorandum in 1963, 2 weeks before his death, that requested that NASA initiate broader cooperation with the USSR in their outer space and lunar landing programs. Part of this document says that NASA would have to share classified UFO secrets with the Soviets. It has been claimed that the idea of sharing this information with an enemy state was the last straw for the intelligence community, all of whom apparently formed together to pool information and plans in a group called the Majestic 12, which was supposedly formed by President Truman in 1947 to deal with UFO activity. In documents that had apparently been saved from a fire known as the MJ-12 documents, it is stated that Kennedy has been making inquiries about the Majestic 12's activities that cannot be allowed. The document goes on to talk about how the issue should be handled, saying that when conditions become non-conducive for growth in our environment, and Washington cannot be influenced any further, the weather is lacking any precipitation, and it should be wet. Well, for a layman, this is more confusing than anything. It may be clear when you consider that wet work is a euphemism for assassination. It should of course be noted that official government agencies claim that these documents are forgeries, But it's not like an intelligence agency partially responsible for the death of a president is going to verify documents that supposedly implicate that same government agency. Was President Kennedy killed for trying to force NASA to share information of UFOs with the Soviet Union? If these documents are authentic, it would certainly seem to be the case. Number 1. The Apollo 8 confirmation. The original goal of the 1968 Apollo 8 mission was to be the first craft to leave low orbit and fly in an elliptical medium Earth orbit. JFK had challenged NASA to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade, and that deadline was fast approaching. So, in order to make the most of their opportunities, NASA made a bold call and decided that rather than settling for medium Earth orbit, they would instead quite literally shoot for the moon, which they would then orbit before returning home. Apollo 8 launched on December 21st, 1968, and reached the moon on Christmas Eve. Millions watched as astronauts Frank Borman, Jim Lovell, and Bill Anders made their orbit of the moon. Despite NASA having a reputation for planning everything down to the minutiae, the plans for this broadcast were surprisingly loose. As Borman recalled, "We were told that on Christmas Eve we would have the largest audience that had ever listened to a human voice, and the only instructions that we got from NASA was to do something appropriate." The astronauts chose to take turns reading from the book of Genesis while their craft made 10 orbits around the moon. As Lovell later said, "The first 10 verses of Genesis is the foundation of many of the world's religions, not just the Christian religion. There are more people in other religions than the Christian religion around the world, and so this would be appropriate to that, and that's how it came to pass." With the more sentimental aspects of the broadcast complete and their mission a success, it was time for the astronauts to come home. Mission Control waited anxiously as Christmas Eve turned into Christmas Day to find out if the engine burn for the craft to leave their lunar orbit had worked. Word soon came from Jim Lovell confirming not only that the ship was on its way home, but something else as well. Lovell's radio communication stated, "Roger. Please be informed there is a Santa Claus." In all the hubbub concerning the first lunar orbit, this news seemed almost like an afterthought. But the fact that a NASA astronaut confirmed that not only is Santa real, but that he lives on the moon is astounding. NASA never followed up on this information publicly, but what else have they learned since then? Are the legendary elves really moon people? Is the workshop located on the dark side of the moon? This is yet another example of NASA giving us bites of information that raise more questions than they answer. Number 5. The NASA Photoshop cover-up. The most recent of the incidents on this list is the accusation from prominent UFO hunter Scott C. Waring that NASA is editing archival photos to remove alien craft in an effort to hide the existence of extraterrestrials from the people of Earth. As evidence of this, he posted a photo from the 1968 Apollo 7 mission that he claims shows a UFO on his blog, saying that the craft he saw in 2013 had been edited out of the photo by 2015. As he himself put it, "Guys, I discovered this UFO back in 2013 and NASA used my website to edit it out by 2015. Now I have found them in the US National Archives. They have accidentally saved the original Apollo 7 photo with the UFO in it. The photo in question shows a black object seemingly floating below the Apollo 7 spacecraft and above the planet. The supposedly edited photo does not show the small black object." Waring expressed his concerns in the following quote, "This is 100% proof that NASA used my discoveries and used photo editing software to edit out the UFO and then add a lot of contrast to the original photo to cover up most of the detail. Then, to top it off, they no longer have the largest 5 megabyte size to download, but instead only have a tiny thumbnail of about 200 kilobytes in size. Its reduced size and quality has destroyed its usefulness. NASA has to be stopped. This kind of cover-up is very corrupt and deceitful to not only the American public, but the world." Despite these claims, the black mark can be seen in other official versions of the photo, and according to analog film experts, they say it is likely just an imperfection in the photo negative. As they put it, irregular shaped dull marks or roundish spots on the surface of your film are likely to be drying marks, caused by the droplets of water forming in the film's surface during the drying stage. These marks are typically seen on the film backing. Films washed in hard water areas are more likely to see this problem. Is NASA really altering photos in their archives in order to cover cover up alien life? Possibly. Is this an example of them doing so? I'm not entirely convinced. Number 4. The Space Fireflies. During the race to the moon between the United States and the Soviet Union, one of the landmark moments of the race was the Mercury Atlas 6 mission, when American astronaut John Glenn became the first American to orbit the Earth. As important as this moment was in the history of space exploration, it is better remembered by UFO enthusiasts for what Glenn saw out of his window during the mission. While Glenn was flying over Australia in the Friendship 7 capsule, he looked out the window and saw what he later described as fireflies. Upon seeing this, he radioed the following back to NASA Mission Control: "I am in a big mass of some very small particles that are brilliantly lit up like they're luminescent. They look like little stars." Glenn then tapped on the window, and the fireflies seemed to react and flew away. NASA was of course worried that this was parts of the capsule heat shield collapsing, but thankfully for Glenn, this was not the case. Because the mission wasn't being broadcast live, the firefly story didn't get much media attention, being somewhat of an urban legend. However, when the next American in space, Scott Carpenter, also reported seeing the luminescent particles, NASA had an excuse at the ready, saying that it was caused by ice particles from the condensation of the ship's heat exchanger. While to most this would sound like a plausible explanation, John Glenn maintained until the day he died that what he saw could not be explained by ice particles. What did John Glenn see out his capsule window during the 1962 Mercury Atlas mission? Was it really ice particles? Or is NASA trying to hide the truth from the people of Earth? Was John Glenn right? Is it a coincidence that multiple James Bond films were also directed by a man named John Glenn? We may never know. Number 3. Shuttle Atlantis' close encounter. In an age of internet and live broadcasts, it is getting harder and harder to prevent information from reaching the public, with it usually being only a matter of time before secrets find their way out of the shadows and into the light. Such is the case in our next entry, which happened in 2006 during the STS-115 mission of the Shuttle Atlantis to aid in the construction of the International Space Station. The shuttle and its crew had successfully completed its mission and had almost completed the trip back to Earth when Mission Commander Brent Jett looked out the window and noticed, as he put it, some kind of reflective structure. He radioed Mission Control and told them what he saw, telling them that what he was looking at, quote, "didn't look like anything I've ever seen outside of this shuttle, that's for sure." NASA was worried that whatever the object was, it might be some crucial part of the craft that had broken off. They took control of the cameras that were broadcasting the mission to try and get a look at what Commander Jett had seen. To the shock of all the cameras, it saw 3 bright objects in the sky. The information was picked up by the media, and NASA scrambled to come up with a suitable explanation. They ordered an inspection of the craft to see if it was a broken off part of the ship as they had assumed, but could not find any evidence of damage. When the ship returned to Earth, another inspection was ordered, but once again, no damage other than a small micrometeor impact was found. NASA has never been able to explain what happened during this mission, and seem to have made no effort at all to solve the mystery in the years since. Or do they already know what happened, and simply do not want us to be in on the secret? As disturbing as that prospect may be, it would not surprise me to learn that it is the truth. Number 2. Gordon Cooper's alien adventures. Gordon Cooper is an important figure in the history of space travel, having served as an aerospace engineer, a test pilot, a pilot for the United States Air Force, and being the youngest of the 7 original Project Mercury astronauts. He was the first American to spend a day in space, the first to sleep in space, and was the last American to go on a solo orbital mission, and set the space endurance record when he traveled 3,312,993 miles in 190 hours in 56 minutes, thus proving that astronauts could survive in space for the length of time that would be required to travel to the moon and back. He was an extremely important historical figure, but unlike many other NASA astronauts, he was not shy about talking about the various experiences he had over the years with unidentified flying objects, and the government's effort to cover these experiences up. Gordon Cooper claimed that he had seen his first UFO while flying over West Germany in 1951, but that his first experience with government cover-ups came in 1957 1967 while he was stationed at the Edwards Air Force Base in California. He had put a crew in charge of setting up an Ascania cinetheodolite, which is a photographic instrument used for collecting trajectory data of aircraft, missiles, rockets, and other similar equipment. The equipment was set up on a dry lake bed and set to take pictures at 30 frames per second as aircraft landed. The men later reported to Cooper that they had seen something odd and had captured images of a strange-looking saucer-like aircraft that hadn't made any sound while landing or taking off. The men were used to seeing experimental aircraft, but were unnerved at the sight of this saucer, which had hovered over them, landed about 50 yards away using 3 extended landing gears, but had taken off when they had approached for a closer look. Cooper called a special Pentagon number, which was meant for reporting such phenomena, and was told to have the film developed, to make no prints of it, and to send it to them in a locked courier pouch. However, as Cooper would later admit, they hadn't told him not to look at the negative before sending them out. He looked at them and saw incredibly high-quality images of the flying saucer. He had expected there to be a follow-up investigation, but never heard anything further. He tried to track down what happened to the images, but never found out, assuming that they ended up in the Air Force's Project Blue Book, which was the Air Force's official UFO investigation. He had to deal with more government concealment, this time from NASA, when he did his solo orbital mission in 1963. While being broadcast live on NBC, Cooper told Mission Control that he could see a glowing green object which was rapidly approaching his craft. The object was not an illusion and even showed up on radar, but when he returned to Earth, he was forbidden to talk about the experience any further with the press. The reporters brought in for the subsequent press conference for the mission were also told that they could not ask Cooper about the green orb either. Years later, Cooper would talk about this encounter more openly and discuss the fact that NASA and other government agencies were covering up several stories of UFO encounters. He even spoke to the United Nations on the subject, saying, "Authority is afraid that people may think of God knows what kind of horrible invaders. So the password still is, we have to avoid panic by all means." Did Gordon Cooper really see multiple UFOs during his life? And if so, did NASA and the Air Force prevent the public from learning about these visitors from another planet in an effort to avoid panic? Will there ever be a point in history where they trust the people of the world to be able to handle such news? Much like the identity of the flying saucer's pilots, it is unknown. Number 1. Did we even go to the moon? As we bring our video to a close, we must talk about one of the most popular NASA cover-up theories out there. While several people are convinced that NASA has come across evidence of alien life that they are keeping from us, or that they have even managed to make contact with extraterrestrials, there is still an inherent level of trust involved in those theories. The idea that NASA is covering up such evidence relies on the belief that NASA has really managed to send men to space. However, there are a significant number of people who don't even trust that this occurred, believing that man has never set foot on the moon. In the interest of fairness, let's explore this theory further. The gist of the theory is that while the United States and Russia were racing to see who could get to the moon first, the United States government built a set and filmed fake astronauts pretending to walk on the moon, broadcasting the footage across the world and effectively ending the space race in their favor. Some theories even say that famous director Stanley Kubrick was hired after the impressive special effects in his science fiction film 2001: A Space Odyssey caught the eye of the US government. He was apparently hired to direct the allegedly fake moon landing. The evidence that people have latched onto over the years include shadows in photos that don't line up how people think they should, claims that the astronauts could not survive the Earth's radiation field, the lack of stars in the moon landing photos, and the infamous American flag that they claim appears to be flapping in the wind despite the lack of wind on the moon. Most, if not all of this evidence has been explained by NASA, but once someone is convinced that the moon landings are fake, no explanation from NASA is going to convince them. Whether the moon landing is real or not, it is a good example of how the public's trust in a government institution can erode to the point where some people feel like they can't even take the most basic bits of information provided by NASA for granted.
Number 5. Al Worden. American test pilot, engineer, and NASA astronaut Alfred Merrill Worden was the module pilot for the Apollo 15 lunar mission in 1971. One of the 24 people who have flown to the moon. Woohoo! He's got a couple of firsts though. He orbited it 74 times in the command module. He was the first to drive a moon car. After Apollo 15 reached lunar orbit and his crewmates departed, and Worden spent 3 days alone in his module. That's terrifying. Traveling the furthest out from any other human. After he returned, the crew and him became involved in a NASA controversy, however. Not over leaked alien info, but over postage stamps they had taken to the moon. Yeah, big no-no, apparently. They were reprimanded by NASA and did not fly in space again. Worden remained at NASA until 1975, then entered a private sector. And then it gets weird. On a British television morning show, Al Worden started talking about some interesting stuff. They asked him, "Why should we keep going back to the moon?" He paused, and replied, "Survival. Survival of our species." Worden also rejected the notion that humans could colonize planets within our solar system, calling them unsustainable. Then he claims he knows where to find habitable planets. When pressed on aliens if he believes them or not, he said, "Yes. You know, I've been asked that question hundreds of times. Yeah, we are the aliens though. We just think there's somebody else. But we were the ones who came from somewhere else because somebody else had to survive. They got in their little spaceship and they came here and they landed and they started civilization here. And if you don't believe me, go get books on the ancient Sumerians and see what they have to say about it. They'll tell you right up front." End quote. Okay, when you hear an astronaut say that, kind of jarring. Number 4, Roswell. As always, if you dig what we do here on Top 5 Scary, make sure you hit that like button. Birth of the UAP phenomenon. 1945, the US's first nuclear explosion. 1946, first underwater nuclear explosion. 1947, the first crash flying saucer. Coincidence? I think not. Especially since they've been known to hover around nuclear bases. Probably for the better. Humans are kind of the worst. Local rancher Mac Brazel finds the wreckage on his property in Lincoln County, New Mexico. Sheriff Wilcox shows RAAF's commanding officer Colonel Blanchard the materials, and during the night, the Air Force combs the entirety of the property, apparently harboring 2 small injured alien bodies. Taking them, of course, to Kirtland Air Force Base, New Mexico that night. And the very next morning, the Roswell Air Force makes a statement claiming they have recovered a crashed flying disc in local newspapers. Boom! History, baby! Photographs of Jesse Marcel, the head intelligence officer who investigated and recovered some of the debris. The very next day, the Army retracts their statement and all of a sudden, a high-altitude weather balloon. Can you believe that, huh? AKA the birth of a conspiracy theory. Nuclear fission explosions, weather balloons. Something's not adding up here. Number 3, Edgar Mitchel. Edgar Dean Mitchell was a U.S. Navy officer, aviator, test pilot, engineer, NASA astronaut, and of course, a ufologist. Ufology is the pseudo term for somebody who studies the UFO phenomenon. I don't think there's a degree you can get that in. If so, I'm signing up. What school? Sorry? He was the lunar module pilot of the Apollo 14 in 1971 and spent 9 hours working on the lunar surface. He was the 6th person to walk on the moon. Yeah, he was walking while Worden was up there drifting in the currents of space. Mitchell publicly expressed his opinions and that he was sure that there were thousands of UFOs recorded since the early 1940s belonging to other planets. Thousands. Dateline NBC conducted an interview with Mitchell in 1996. He talked about meeting with officials from 3 different countries who claimed that they had met extraterrestrials in person. Quote, "The evidence for alien contact was very strong and classified by governments, who were covering up visitations and existence of alien bodies in places such as Roswell, New Mexico." Mitchell's book, The Way of the Explorer, discusses his journey. In 2004, he told the St. Petersburg Times that the US government was studying alien bodies and that this group had specifically stopped briefing US presidents since the 1960s. He said, quote, "We all know that UFOs are real. Now, the question is, where do they come from?" In 2008, Mitchell then was interviewed and claimed that Roswell crash was in fact the aliens that had contacted humans several times, but that the government had hidden the truth for more than 60 years. Scary stuff, scary stuff. He sadly passed in 2016. If we just reread the credentials alone, just one more time. Number 2, James McDivitt. James Alton McDivitt is an American test pilot, Air Force pilot, engineer, and NASA astronaut who flew in both the Gemini and Apollo programs. After graduating first in his class with a Bachelor of Science degree in aeronautical engineering, he qualified as a test pilot at the Air Force. In 1962, McDivitt was selected by NASA for the Gemini 4 mission. In 1965, he saw, filmed, and photographed an object which approached the Gemini 4 as they were orbiting Earth. Over Hawaii, a craft of some sort. The UFO had a long arm sticking out of it. Here's what Major James McDivitt said. "I was flying with Ed White. He was sleeping at the time, so I don't have anybody to verify this story, but we were drifting in space when suddenly an object appeared in the window. It's a cylindrical object, white. It had a long arm that stuck out of the side. The film was sent back to NASA and reviewed by some NASA film technicians. One of them selected what he thought was what they were talking about, at least before I had the chance to review it, and it was not the picture. It was a picture of a sun reflection on the window. So what were the pictures that he was talking about? In 1975, McDivitt said, "I never made a big deal out of it. It was something I definitely couldn't identify. It looked like a beer can with a pencil sticking out of it. Yeah, I would eventually give up on that too if those were my credentials and people were like, yeah, right, James. When somebody has like 25 years of designing and flying space shuttles around, when they say, hey guys, I'm seeing something up here, it's not like, oh, James, clean those old specs, would you? Yuck, yuck. Houston, we have a problem. And number 1, Gordon Cooper. Leroy Gordon Cooper Jr., an American aerospace engineer, test pilot, U.S. Air Force pilot, and the youngest of the 7 original astronauts in Project Mercury, the first human space program in the United States. You know the pictures. It looks like they're wearing a tinfoil suit, you know? Old school, old school. After service as a fighter pilot in World War II, he qualified as a test pilot in 1956 and then was selected as an astronaut in 1959. In 1963, Cooper piloted the longest and last Mercury spaceflight, Mercury Atlas 9. 34 hours in space. The first American to spend an entire day in space, the first person to sleep in space, and the last American launched on a solo orbit mission. In Cooper's autobiography, Leap of Faith, co-authored by Bruce Henderson, he recounted his experiences with the Air Force and NASA and an alleged UFO conspiracy. Cooper claimed to have seen his first UFO while flying over Germany, then saw them land in a dry lake bed. Cooper claimed up until his death that the US was indeed covering up UFOs. He said that there were hundreds of reports made by his fellow pilots, many coming from the military pilots on radar. In his memoirs, Cooper wrote that he had seen unexplained aircrafts tons in his career, and that in 1978 he actually testified before the United Nations on the topic. He sadly passed in 2004. He was such a strong advocate for disclosure, and all of these astronauts are remembered as putting their neck and name out on the line for some truth. But I mean, those UFO enthusiasts, huh? They're all wackos, right? Right? Number 5, Leland Melvin. American engineer and now retired NASA astronaut Leland Melvin has spent hundreds of hours in space. Literally hundreds. Leland holds 4 honorary doctorates for his service in education, the sciences, and philanthropy. Doctorates. I'm just saying that before the comments start rolling in saying he's just another wacko. He's crazy. They're not wackos, people. Any of them. They've been screened so many times by so many people with so many tests, they have to be damn well near perfect before going up on or in NASA's budget. Before his career with NASA, Leland was actually All-American for football. Detroit Lions, Toronto Argos. Guy made the NFL and then said, you know what? I think I'm gonna be an astronaut. Like, give this guy a Netflix movie, would ya? He was selected by NASA in 1998 after getting injured with a football career. Guy goes from the turf to working at NASA Langley Center. This guy's put in time, both down here and up there. Mission after mission with NASA. He's got quite the practice at the whole floating around thing. When Leland was pressed about otherworldly visitors and his ideas about the cosmos, he said this when he was working up in orbit. He had seen something translucent, curved and organic looking when he was working with fellow astronaut Randy Bresnik. The pair of them, again, called down to NASA to ask what it could be. NASA's official response was probably ice. Yeah, nice and specific there, Houston. Thank you for that. When has NASA ever said probably? Melvin dismissed this and figured it was NASA's explanation to just cover it up. Like, who's more qualified here? That's all I'm asking. When the most qualified people are like, yeah, I can't tell if that's frozen water or a full-on mothership, Houston. Either they shouldn't be up there at all, or we need some more Windex on those windows there, NASA. Huh? Number 4, Ivan Wagner. As always, if you dig what we do here at Top 5 Scary, make sure you hit that like button or comment down below. It really helps the channel out. Have you ever seen a UFO out there? Yeah, you. Have you seen one? Comment down below with some details about your experiences. I know I have. Twice now. Hence the obsession with all this stuff. Those Reddit rabbit holes, boy oh boy. Speaking of falling into a wormhole of conspiracy and who said what, astronaut Ivan Wagner, or I should say cosmonaut Ivan Wagner, since he's Russian by birth, and although he's bunking up with some roomies up there in the ISS, he was on the ISS as a first timer just back in 2020. Does NASA initiate rookies up there? Like pull pranks on the newbies? Like no gravity, just unbuckle you while you sleep, flow you out, you know? He and fellow Russian Anatoly Ivanishin were working up there alongside Chris Cassidy, the American commander of said expedition. When Wagner was orbiting the Earth, he might have captured some footage of UFOs, better known as UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. It's the jargon nowadays. The aurora lights behind Earth's beautiful curves was being recorded from the ISS when he saw a string of really weird lights moving in a really weird way. He labeled the video Space Guests. Wagner tweeted the vid, which apparently shows the aurora australis near Antarctica, and then all of a sudden this blob of organized lights just cruises on over the globe. Looks like a blob of like glitter just trucking across space. Like, what is that? Of course, NASA didn't follow up. Like, what are they gonna say? Oh yeah, those are stars that move and blink, I think. I mean, no? Space junk. Yeah, space debris and swamps and things. Also, what a lame excuse. Space junk? Okay, so you're saying there's lots of litter up there? That's what you're saying? That's what just zipped over my house silently, defying gravity and lasered up my cow? Yeah, I don't think so, NASA. Number 3, Chris Hadfield. Retired Canadian astronaut, engineer, fighter pilot, and musician. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Hadfield flew 2 missions and also served as commander on the International Space Station. Before his career as an astronaut, he served in the Canadian Armed Forces for 25 years as an air commander fighter pilot. So he has the credentials to say the least. In 1992, Hadfield was accepted into the Canadian astronaut program. He first flew in space in 1995, and since then, he says he's seen tons of stuff up there just zipping around that even a man with all those credentials says he can't explain. Quote, "I've seen countless things in the sky, but he has a pretty cool take on it. He doesn't keep it on the DL, he doesn't boast, and he doesn't panic. Seems like Chris has the mentality like, quote, to see something in the sky that you don't understand and then to immediately conclude it's intelligent life from another solar system is the height of foolishness and lack of logic. However, Chris seems to have a little dirt on Mars that maybe we all don't. He said, I think the fundamental question is that Mars was a lot like Earth 4 billion years ago when life first formed. So if it happened here, did it happen there? It would be evident somewhere in the geologic records. All we need is one fossil for proof. He thinks there could be potentially alien life in the clouds of Venus or on the distant moons of one of our gas giants. Researchers have suggested that there could be microbial life in the clouds of Venus because of the presence of ammonia, which on Earth is a key indicator of aquatic life. Aquatic life, eh? Atlanteans? Hadfield on the UAP phenomenon, quote, "We have 7 people living up there. We've been sending people to space since I was born. I spent half a year off planet looking everywhere. It makes no sense at all that intelligent life somewhere from not our solar system could cross interstellar space and just sneak around and only be caught on some strange video by fighter pilots. It just doesn't pass any basic sniff test or logic. It's fun, it's exciting, but if you use reason, the whole argument falls apart." End quote. Okay, Chris Hadfield, keep your secrets for now, you polite Canadian you. Wait till people start looking into Paul Hellyer, another very polite Canadian with some secrets of his own. Until then, you keep distracting us up there with that guitar, Chris. I see you, Jake Sully. Number 2, Michael Collins. NASA veteran and the very first driver up there, Mr. Michael Collins himself served as command module pilot on the historic Apollo 11 mission in 1969. When Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin walked on the moon for the very first time, saying those very first famous lines we all know so well, Collins was back parking that thing up there. Mr. Collins stayed up there by himself in lunar orbit waiting for the safe return of his crewmates. I can't even stay in a basement with the lights off by myself. Imagine being up there just drifting in the currents of matter, like being in the middle of the ocean. Yeah, no way, dude. The astronaut retired from NASA in 1970 and spent his free time answering questions on Twitter. Apparently, he has gotten some really interesting buzz. Mr. Collins invited the interweb to chat, saying, quote, "Are we alone? Hashtag Ask Michael Collins." And boy, oh boy, did he get some responses. Everything from wackos who like aliens to very, very high-ranked generals and pilots who are apparently also wackos who like aliens for talking about this. Collins, quote, "I used to think that NASA sent me to the wrong place, to the moon, because I think Mars is a much more interesting place," end quote. Collins has talked about it in the past about the possibility of alien life existing beyond Earth and doesn't shy away from discussing the topic in full. In 1999, for instance, he even argued on the topic of life developing in other parts of this infinite cosmos. So maybe it has then. He wrote in his book saying, quote, "I am alone now. Truly alone, and absolutely isolated from any known life. Although I may feel like I'm the same person, I also feel that I am different from other people. I have been places and done things you simply would not believe." Collins circled the moon once every 2 hours. What's scarier, walking on an unknown rock that apparently no one's ever visited, or flying all the way around it by yourself in the pitch black with no communications. Collins achieved the rank of Major General. He left NASA in 1970 to join the State Department and later became director of the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum in Washington. One of the most key players in this whole thing. Michael Collins sadly passed in 2021. Number 1. Buzz Aldrin. Of course, the poster child for the whole phenomenon itself, Mr. Edwin Eugene Aldrin Jr. American astronaut, engineer, fighter pilot with a doctorate of science and astronautics. This guy is overqualified, okay? 3 spacewalks in 1966, Gemini 12 mission in 1969, Apollo 11 mission. He and mission commander Neil Armstrong were the first 2 people to land on the moon. Quote, "There was something out there, close enough to be observed. What could it be?" According to Aldrin, on Apollo 11 to the moon, quote, "I observed a light out the window that appeared to be moving alongside us. What could that have been other than a spacecraft from another country or another world? It was either the rocket that had separated from us or the 4 panels that moved away when we extracted the lander, right?" After he returned from his missions, he was convinced he saw aliens while he was out there. Credentials aside, he took a lie detector test, people, which he passed with flying colors. In an interview with C-SPAN Buzz, he talked about the future potential of Earth's moon for humanity. He added a little extra info that might have gained the spark to go back, regarding a certain monolith on a moon. Quote, "Visit the moon Phobos of Mars. There's a monolith there, a very unusual structure on this little potato object that goes around Mars once in every 7 hours. When people find out about that, they're gonna say, 'Who put that there?' And you bet, Buzz, I'll be the first one to ask that."
Number 5 on this list is the Navy UFOs. This is one of the most famous alien or UFO encounters the humans have had in the last few decades. Reader's Digest says, when it comes to extraterrestrial life and making contact with those from outer space, everyone has an opinion. Some think it's all a hack, some are open to speculate, and others still are entirely taken with the tales and stories as old as time, cameras poised and tinfoil hats at the ready. UFOs have fascinated and confused us for years as each new flying saucer or hovercraft sighting makes national news and splits us into 2 camps. While it's easy to debunk individual stories, it's way harder to argue with the US Department of Defense. In videos leaked back in 2007 and 2017, the Pentagon has aimed to clear up any misconceptions by the public on whether or not the footage that has been circulating was real. In the video, unidentified objects are seen spinning and hovering in the air and above the water, while 2 Navy pilots remark in shock and confusion over the 2 oblong disc-shaped objects. So you may be thinking, well, how did the government try to hide it if they were the ones that actually released it? Well, they did release it themselves, but we have to remember that that was only after the videos had been leaked. In 2007 and 2017, these videos had made their way to the public without the government's stamp of approval. So everyone was freaking out and speculating on what the heck this thing could be and why we hadn't heard anything about it. What the heck it is, I don't know, but why we hadn't heard about it is because the government had chosen not to tell us. The only reason that they inevitably released the videos is because they got their hand caught in the cookie jar. They were found out. They were exposed when these videos were leaked. At that point, they could either continue to vehemently deny something that was clearly pointing towards naval activity, or they could fess up and release it themselves in hopes of taking less public backlash. They opted to do the second one because, in their words, they wanted to clear up any misconceptions by the public. That, however, is code for, we got caught and we think that releasing it now would be better for us in the long run. If it was up to them though, these never would have seen the light of day. Which then makes you wonder, how many other videos like this are out there that you and me, we just don't know about? Number 4 on this list is the O'Hare incident. Chicago's O'Hare International Airport had quite the interesting experience back in 2006. Reader's Digest says, on November 7th, 2006, United Flight 446 was about to depart from Chicago's O'Hare International Airport when a dozen United Airline employees spotted an odd metallic craft hovering over the gate. The employees reported that it hung in the air for several minutes before finally shooting up at breakneck speed into the clouds. The strangest part? The UFO did not register on the airport's radar despite all the witnesses. The FAA declined to investigate, chalking it up to a weather phenomenon. A weather phenomenon. Seriously? Yeah. Alright there, guys. Also, for those who don't know, the FAA stands for the Federal Aviation Administration, and they're a government-run agency that deals with pretty much anything that flies. So don't get it twisted, guys. This was definitely the government deciding that they didn't want to do anything with this incident, or at the very least, they didn't want the public to know about it. But you would think that they could come up with a better excuse than a weather incident, right? Like, I don't know about you guys, but I don't think I've ever seen a weather incident cause odd metallic things to hover in the sky. Number 3 on this list is the 7 strange crafts. So this one is really interesting because the government did address it, but they definitely didn't chalk it up to being what a lot of people thought it was in Aliens. Reader's Digest says a 1952 incident where 7 unidentified objects appeared over secure airspace near the Pentagon was captured on film. The crafts were registered on radar and jets were immediately sent to investigate these suspicious strange crafts. However, when the American jets approached that airspace, those 7 objects disappeared from the radar. When the jets landed, the objects returned to the radar screen once more. President Harry S. Truman was notified, and Air Force Intelligence Director General Sanford held a press conference saying that there were reports made by credible observers of relatively incredible things. It's this group of observations that we're attempting to resolve, but there was no resolution. So we kind of just heard from the government that they were on it, but then didn't really hear anything after that. There was no resolution, or at least there wasn't one that was released to the public. Could I believe that they did actually discover something here, and they just decided that telling the public wouldn't be the best course of action? Absolutely I could. In fact, I almost guarantee it. I highly doubt that the American government would have seen this stuff and then after one pass with the jets just been like, well, alright, guess nothing's there, and then call it quits. No, they definitely would have kept investigating and looking until they discovered something. Telling the public about that, though, probably wasn't in the cards. Number 2 on this list is the Richard French incident. So this is definitely one of the bigger cover-ups in UFO government history. Reader's Digest says in the 1950s, it was Lieutenant Colonel Richard French's job to explain away UFO phenomena for the government. There was only one problem. Lieutenant Colonel French actually saw alien ships with his own eyes, reports the Daily Mail. At a citizen hearing on disclosure in 2013, the then 83-year-old man told the truth for the first time about what he saw as a young man in the waters of St. John's, Newfoundland, 2 UFOs that had crashed and sunk in the water, and aliens trying to fix them. They succeeded and took off. He didn't mention UFOs in his report at the time. How's that for a freaky government cover-up? Yeah, so that's about as government cover-up as we can get, guys. My guy legit says UFOs saw aliens and specifically omitted it to save face and not panic the public. I guess the guilt and also just the whole story had been eating away at him for decades though, and eventually he had to come clean and tell the public. Too little too late though with a story like this, because we never got an opportunity to investigate these aliens or talk to them or anything. Or at least, that's if he's telling the truth. For all we know, he's still leaving some parts of the story out. Only the government and Richard really know what happened. And number 1 on this list is the unexpected visitor. A man named Rick Porcels, who lived in Texas, got a very unexpected and unwanted visitor late one evening at his home. The story goes like this. In 2008, an unfathomably large aircraft hovered above Stevensville, Texas. Many people in the community saw it, and according to the Mutual UFO Network, a pilot named Stephen Allen reported that the unusual aircraft was flying at an estimated 3,000 miles per hour and was being chased by fighter jets. Then, a man named Rick Sorrells said he saw the same thing while hunting. Later, Sorrells says a strange man knocked on his door and said, "Son, We have the same caliber weapons you have, but we have more of them. You need to shut your mouth about what you saw. Can you imagine getting a knock on your door and it being the government basically telling you that if you say anything, you're gonna die? Yeah, that is definitely an unexpected and unwanted visitor if you ask me. So not only were they threatening citizens, I also didn't hear any reports from the government about that jet that was flying behind the UFO. You'd think that if a jet fighter were deployed to chase down an enemy aircraft in friendly airspace, the public should probably know about it to stay safe. But nope. Absolutely nothing. Total radio silence from the government. How many other times have they gone to someone's house and threatened them like this that we don't know about? How many people have been intimidated by the government to stay silent? Really scary question that, honestly, we might not even want to know the answer to.
Number 5. TikTok sighting. Our first entry on this list comes to us from a very reputable source, TikTok user Drillabang, who posted this video recently online. The caption, "We caught them out there," is almost Mulder's catchphrase of "the truth is out there." Almost. And it seems like they are. The video shows a short clip of someone filming the sky and clouds, and passing through the clouds slowly is something. It's kind of hard to tell. It's an unidentified flying object. A small black being with what looks like tentacles protruding from it, like a little black jellyfish. The entity is moving slowly through the sky, with what looks like an electrical field following all around it. The being appears to be electrical, possibly a small mechanical drone. My first thought looking at one of these things is just how much this thing looks like the Sentinels from the Matrix. Could very well be evidence of the simulation leaking through. This clip is undeniably pretty odd. It's hard to make out just how big this flying entity is, although it does look a little bit small, but really it's hard to tell. Is it a spacecraft? Is it a living being but biomechanical? Is it a drone? Of course, it has to be said, the clip, as impressive as it is, could very well be a high production hoax. Like I said, the thing really does look a little too perfect for me, and it looks a lot like one of those Matrix Sentinels. I honestly wouldn't even be surprised if it's a shrunken down 3D model of it used for the video. But real or fake, you can't deny that the video is captivating and has people talking. Well, what do you think? Let me know down in the comments about this one if you think this has you convinced. And hey, while I've got you here listening, you want to see a whole lot more spooky stuff this month? Well, I got news for you, pal. I got boxes full of spooky stuff. Subscribe for a fresh fright in your inbox delivered daily. Number 4, Chilean UFO. Our next entry was posted to Reddit on r/aliens. I mean, where else are you gonna find alien clips? The video posted is filmed from a mountain in Chile, where a group of friends on a hike found something amazing in the sky, and luckily had their phones on them to record it. This entity floating around them doesn't really look like your traditional UFO sightings. It looks like a ball of pure energy just hovering above them in a triangular shape, looking like distilled pure light or just some photons or something. Looking around in the background, you can see there's nothing around them. No airports, no mysterious army bases nearby, just a big mountain range and a bizarre glowing ball of light hovering around aimlessly. A user on Reddit offered a rudimentary translation of the friends talking, which adds a little bit of insight to the clip. We can hear the friends joking that it could be a spirit bomb from Goku and there's going to be an epic duel soon. Goku is technically an alien, so I guess if Goku was real and you saw him flying around on the Nimbus cloud, that would qualify for a UFO sighting. They go on to joke that it looks like something out of the movie Independence Day. It's really hard to say just what this thing is. Now, usually I tend to roll a little bit more Scully than Mulder, and I'm naturally a bit skeptic, but I am completely out of ideas looking at this thing. The edges of the triangle are so very visible, and it doesn't really seem like it follows any one particular flight pattern. I can't take even the slightest guess what this might be, so your guess is just as good as mine, my ghouls and goblins. Take a look for yourself, and decide for yourself what the answer is. Number 3, the Ring of Light. Another entry coming to us fresh from Reddit, posted by user Jesse Zell. A short clip that shows us something incredibly bizarre. The clip is captioned appropriately, "The most unexplained thing I have ever seen in my life," and I'm strongly inclined to agree. Take a little look-see. In the clip, we get a pretty good shot at a suburban house and the overcast night sky above. A little bit above the house, there appears to be a ring of light that appears, circling around, appearing a few lights at a time, rounding the house a few times. That's bizarre. Even the skeptics should buy into this one. I mean, it's easy to just imagine a flying saucer hovering a little bit out of view atop the clouds, descending its undercarriage lights on the neighborhood. A user in the comments proposed that it could just be nothing more than a series of spotlights. But the original poster and uploader of the video insists that from where they were standing, the lights are appearing above the clouds, not below them. And even then, what explains the perfectly circular pattern displayed? The user goes on to say that there was no particularly loud noises emanating from around the skies, and it was very hard to make out what was happening. They go on to add that they're very familiar with drones and have drones flying around their home with some regularity. I'm hoping they mean just a neighbor or an enthusiast and not that they're being watched. And that they would recognize a drone if there was one, and that they are certain these lights were not caused by drones. So just what is causing it? What was it? Is this Reddit user being observed by someone from the stars? Are they potentially a target for an abduction? We eagerly await a follow-up on this one. Number 2, the Cube. Posted to YouTube by user, well, fittingly named, Is This a UFO? This brief 20-second clip showcases a pilot filming from inside the cockpit. Also, side note before I start talking about all the alien stuff, is that safe? Are you allowed to be doing that? I guess the plane doesn't crash in the video, so I'll take their word for it. Anyway, the clip is really short and sweet. We see from the window that there's a small cuboid-like shape blasting through the sky. The footage is extremely clear, unlike most UFO footage, and it's really easy to see what's happening, although it doesn't help matters much or provide you with any clear answers. What we can see is a small black cube propelling itself forward. There's no trail of smoke, no lights flashing, just a small black cube flying around. So what is that? Some comments in the video suggest that it could be a weather balloon or a helium balloon, although I gotta say the altitude is a bit questionable, or why it's traveling horizontally so fast. Its travel in the video does seem a bit pointed and intentional, like it's trying to get somewhere, although that could just be me wanting to apply sentient traits for it because I badly want to believe. Interestingly though, in 2014, a report from a 10-year Navy pilot veteran, Lieutenant Ryan Graves, claims that in his service, he would see UFOs nigh daily and would report them constantly, only to have his reports ignored. Interesting. He said in his time in the service, he'd see unexplainable objects flying by him at hypersonic speeds with no trails, no exhaust, often 30,000 feet up in the air undetected by his radar. He said one of the more consistent things that he would see was an object that looked like a sphere encased in a cube. Kinda sounds a bit like the cube propelling itself forward in this clip, doesn't it? Fascinatingly, after this report from Graves, the Navy announced it would be changing the way it handled UFO reports internally. Perhaps there's something they know and they're not telling us. Number 1, the laser pointer. And finally, we're down to our number 1 clip. Now this is my favorite clip of the bunch, by far. I mean, I would hope so, otherwise why would I bother putting it at the number 1 spot? This clip also comes to us from Reddit from user Luke511, filming above him what appears to be a ball of light bouncing around bizarrely in the sky. A UFO if I've ever seen one. Luke, who when faced with the dangers of the unknown, the wonders of the cosmos, possibly standing on a chance to make that fabled first contact with another civilization with unknown frontiers, stood proudly and takes a laser pointer out and starts flashing it upwards to the sky. Now I have nothing but respect for this absolute madman who got right down to brass tacks. Because him flashing that laser pointer made this video go from, maybe that's a UFO, to, oh, that is definitely a spacecraft being piloted by an intelligent being. In the video, as soon as you see him flashing it around, the vehicle maneuvers on a dime, trying clearly to avoid the laser, which is pretty damning. Now the reason I love this clip so much, besides the fact that I do think it's pretty concrete evidence, assume these really are aliens flying around in that spacecraft. Imagine you're coming down to a new planet and you see a green beam coming from the ground pointing directly at you. Do you think they were freaking out? Do you think they were losing their minds, panicking that they got made? That laser was gonna come for them and destroy them? Or do you think it was more like a kitten situation? Like they saw the laser and got distracted by a really enticing game of intergalactic chase? Luke511, this has gotta be a top moment for humanity and for you as a whole. Tagging a UFO with a laser beam and potentially scaring alien life has got to be a landmark moment for us as a species. My only concern is that maybe this event might have sent intergalactic relations back just a little bit. I'm hoping aliens aren't afraid to visit the planet now because of the danger of green lights. We'll turn them off, we promise. We're sorry, it was just a little prank. Number 5, SCP-2019. Our first SCP featured on today's list is Euclid class organism SCP-2019. This sapient cubical organism appears to us as a green gelatinous substance held in place by a thick, transparent membrane. The cube stands 5 meters by 5 meters by 5 meters and is housed deep inside foundation walls and kept unconscious through round-the-clock sedatives and fed intravenously. instantaneously. SCP-2019 is highly resistant, despite its unassuming appearance. Any damage it incurs, it regenerates quickly in a matter of seconds. On the forward-facing side of the cube, there are 37 eyes resembling human eyes. SCP-2019 is able to move these eyes freely through the membrane in order to see around itself in a 360-degree radius. SCP-2019 has been recorded to sprout tentacular limbs of sorts to allow itself to move. Now, SCP-2019 displays an interesting creation ability, being able to conjure physical objects and even organic beings into reality. The most occurring evidence of this power is its tendency to grow additional brains. During regular monitoring, it's been recorded to grow additional brains at a rate of once every 2 months under favorable conditions. In order to keep SCP-2019 docile, the Foundation has been ordered to always limit it to 1 brain at a time, with all extraneous ones being removed surgically. SCP-2019 is highly intelligent. Interviews with SCP-2019 have been illuminating. While SCP-2019 cannot verbalize directly, it is able to communicate with signs and visualizations, allowing us to understand it better. SCP-2019 has told us that it was banished by the rest of its species for being an outsider, and that its home is far away from here. Although it has been prone to acts of aggression around Foundation staff, it will still be contained for study and general protection. Now, as always, the Foundation thanks you greatly for your interest. If you'd like to stay informed and stay protected, please consider subscribing to Top 5 Scary. Number 4. SCP-2020. SCP-2020 is a Euclid-class entity, a sapient bipedal humanoid entity standing approximately 7 feet tall. It possesses unnaturally long and thin limbs, and I am not describing myself, and it most closely resembles descriptions of little gray men that have been reported over the years. It's likely that SCP-2020 or a member of its species are what was spotted during the Roswell incident. SCP-2020 is composed primarily of a natural form of rubber that appears to serve all bodily functions: musculature, circulatory, and skeletal. SCP-2020 maintains a very simple diet, subsisting solely on paper and water for sustenance. Interestingly, in all time since the Foundation began observing SCP-2020, it has not displayed any visible signs of aging or any signs of growth. Further studies of its biology have been halted, as SCP-2020 is surprisingly resistant to any tearing, so sample studies cannot be collected. Research has been temporarily suspended. Socially, SCP-2020 displays several behaviors common with humans, such as its desire to learn, its desire to interact with humans, and its bizarre semi-understanding of social cues. It understands and speaks English proficiently, even answering to certain names. It's quite friendly to Foundation staff and eager to talk. It claims to have originated from an advanced extraterrestrial civilization, but repeated questioning has produced wildly varying answers from SCP-2020 on the nature of said civilization, such as its technological prowess and other details. It seems most pleased when prompted to speak of its ideas for writing, often quite enthusiastically and jovially sharing its ideas for stories to researchers who are interviewing it. It claims it has a strong desire to be a science fiction writer. Slightly amusing to Foundation scientists, when interviewed, SCP-2020 is happy to share its many ideas, but never actually feels compelled to write any of them down, complaining that it's unable to choose a concept to focus on from its many ideas. Of note, during these interviews with SCP-2020 from Foundation members are that a number of its plot ideas for stories are rife with cliché and are often unfinished and quickly thought out. Nonetheless, researchers have reported finding 2020 a pleasant conversationalist, enjoying their sessions together. Number 3. SCP-2362. SCP-2362 is a Keter-class object and is the designation of the dwarf star Pluto, an interior Kuiper Belt object. Public knowledge of SCP-2362 has been suppressed, intentionally of course, in order to decrease public interest in SCP-2362. In 1983, Foundation researchers uncovered that SCP-2362, formerly designated internally as Pluto, is an organic composition functioning like a shell for something, housing an entity hereto referred to as SCP-2362-1. It is an approximately 900-kilometer long object resembling a bell-shaped mass with 13 flowing tentacles behind it, most closely resembling a jellyfish. A research probe, Orpheus, was sent towards the dwarf planet in 2006 to confirm this hypothesis that the planet was actually an organic entity. The research was fascinating. A fissure was detected on the surface of the object's southern pole, measuring approximately 50 kilometers long and 10 kilometers wide. A repeated surveillance showed the fissure growing daily, increasing in size dramatically. As in a few weeks, the fissure grew from a meager 50 kilometers long to a staggering 950 kilometers long and 370 kilometers in width. After nearly 2 months of observation, 13 masses were spotted sprouting from the southern fissure. After 52 days, the fissure widened, revealing SCP-2362, splitting into 2 halves of one shell and releasing SCP SCP-2362-1, the jellyfish entity. Now, SCP-2362-1's motives are currently unknown, as well as any of its biological functions or drives. What little we do know of it is that it is somehow able to propel itself through space by expanding and contracting its appendages. The current trajectory that it appears to be following suggests that it will leave our solar system within the next 100 years, and as such, it is not considered a threatening object, although it will continuously be monitored by Foundation probes for your security. Number 2. SCP-163. SCP-163 is a safe class object of extraterrestrial origins. SCP-163 is a sapient organism standing roughly 6.5 feet tall. Its body is roughly cylindrical with a circular mouth at the bottom, an approximation of a head at the top, and 8 3-jointed legs circling around the body. SCP-163 has many specialized unique limbs to its species, including 2 prehensile feeding limbs on either side of the mouth, 2 arms near the top of its body used for delicate precision manipulating, 2 larger arms located closer to its legs used for heavier manipulation, and 2 appendages of indeterminate function located between the legs and mouths, but it appears they have been amputated prior to SCP-163's retrieval. SCP-163 was discovered crashed inside a spacecraft in the Andes Mountains and discovered by local miners. The spacecraft had largely been scavenged, but SCP-163 had been kept encased, hidden in stasis. Upon discovery, the retrieval crews brought it to the Foundation, where it was given adequate accommodations. A receiving room with an airlock with room for guests, a storage room where SCP-163 is allowed to keep approved objects, a workshop as well as a dining room, and a sleeping quarters where SCP-163 can rest. SCP-163 displays very good behavior. Its outstanding good behavior is notable by Foundation standards. As such, it is allowed to take short sabbatical trips around the facility, accompanied by a junior researcher for supervision, of course. SCP-163 and any researchers present need to be equipped with isolation suits in order to prevent any cross-contamination between species. SCP-163 displays an advanced level of intelligence, a deep understanding of its own technology, and an ability to express itself artistically when given painting supplies, and has made several attempts to communicate with Foundation personnel. Difficulties have arisen, of course, because SCP-163 is unable to verbalize and only has a rudimentary ability to gesture by furrowing its skin slightly. One of the more docile entries housed by Foundation walls, SCP-163 has been an indelible asset in growing to understand our place in the universe. Number 1. SCP-1281. SCP-1281 is a large safe class object, a biomechanical entity that was found during a routine containment operation of SCP-2362, if you remember from earlier. SCP-1281 is a vaguely teardrop-shaped entity, measuring roughly 12 meters from end to end and 11 meters across. It's spotted with dish-shaped structures on the surface that presumably serve to function as receivers for electromagnetic energy. Several elements and fragments of other mechanical parts are present across the surface of SCP-1281, intimating that more appendages were present at one point, possibly having been damaged. The biological elements of SCP-1281 appear to have grown completely over a technological mechanical frame designed to live in deep space. It's theorized that SCP-1281 was designed for deep space interstellar travel, but a majority of its essential systems had been damaged by unknown sources. Carbon dating has suggested that SCP-1281 is upwards of 1.3 billion years old. SCP-1281 attempted several times to broadcast a message to Foundation researchers, initially broadcasting solely simple binary codes and mathematical concepts. Eventually, it was able to maintain a conversation with our researchers, where it revealed that itself had been sent to share a message from its creator. Paraphrasing slightly, it spoke of its home species and planet that had died off, and wanted to relay its message to other species to warn them, telling them that they must light the darkness. Through SCP-1281, which was known as the Harbinger from its species, this lost species is able to live on in a way, if only through the proof of SCP-1281. After this broadcast, SCP-1281 had asked its interviewer if it had done its job well, if it had performed well. It shut off shortly thereafter. The researcher told it that it did in fact do a good job, and thanked it for its service. The researcher was reprimanded afterwards for breaking protocol for provoking an emotional response.
Number 5 on this list is the WOW signal. The WOW signal is a sound that an astronomer received many years ago that, as of right now, is probably the closest thing we've ever gotten to alien contact. Now, I do want to say that just because we got this signal doesn't mean that they're living among us. However, it does give a strong indication that they're out there in the first place, which is frankly half the battle. Intelligencer writes, in 1977, Ohio State's Big Ear Radio telescope intercepted a 72-second burst of sound that bore signs of having come from interstellar space, which could be a sign of extraterrestrial communication. The anomaly measured 1,420 megahertz, a frequency in the water hole, the term for a radio emission range thought ideal for intergalactic messages because it's unusually quiet. Jerry Amon, the astronomer who spotted it, was so excited that he scribbled a giant "wow" on his printout. Astronomers' explanations for the bizarre phenomenon include secret spy satellites and a passing comet nobody knew about in 1977. But many admit nothing explains it adequately, and even if the signal doesn't prove aliens exist, it's still a tug on the cosmic fishing line. To date, it remains the best evidence of alien communication ever obtained. So wow is right in this case. To receive something like that is a very strong indication that not only is there life out in the universe, but it's also intelligent life. At least intelligent enough to be operating sound systems powerful enough to emit such a frequency in the first place. Again, it's not proof that they're assuredly here on Earth, but it's a good start for sure. Number 4 on this list is habitable planets. Scientists are currently finding more and more planets that are in what is called the Goldilocks zone. The Goldilocks zone is the area from a star that is not too cold and also not too hot, so it should be able to support life from how we've come to understand it. As science learns more and more about these planets, there have been a few that have surfaced that scientists are particularly bullish about. Proxima b, TRAPPIST-1 system, LHS-114-OB, Ross-128b, GJ-121-4b. Now, those probably mean absolutely nothing to you at all, but those are all the planets that have been discovered to be in the Goldilocks zone and could support life. They are also all the planets that people have reported scientists not wanting to talk about. There's a bit of a conspiracy theory going on right now that scientists have actually discovered proof of alien life in these locations, but are hiding it from the public so as to not start a mass chaos. Now, this is all speculation, but why else would these scientists want to hide information about planets that are apparently in the perfect spot to harbor life? Hard to say for sure, but aliens are definitely a possibility. Number 3 on this list is the numbers game. The universe has widely been believed to be infinite. That means it's really freaking big. If the universe is infinite, then it only makes sense that there would be at least some place out there that has other life. That, my friends, is basically the numbers game. BBC writes, most scientists agree that alien life almost certainly exists in the universe somewhere. Our galaxy contains in the region of 300 billion stars, and we're now discovering planets traveling around these stars. The more we look and the more technology we put out there, the more of these exoplanets we find. To date, we've detected around 4,000, and that's just in our galaxy. If we look at the universe as a whole, then there are approximately 200 billion galaxies. Why would life just occur here? We're pretty convinced it's out there, says space scientist Maggie Aderin-Pocock. It is purely a numbers game, it is a probability. So this argument makes a lot of sense to me, guys. 200 billion galaxies, that is a lot of galaxies and a lot of stars in those galaxies, and basically just a lot of chances to have life appear. Now, this life doesn't necessarily need to be living among us. It could be out in the universe waiting to be found, but similar to our WOW signal example, this is a great start. It's widely believed in the scientific community that there is life out there, and who knows, maybe it's here too. Number 2 on this list is the billionaires. Now, this is going to be a bit of a fallacy because I'm going to appeal to authority with this one. Basically, I'm going to say that there are a bunch of smart, powerful, and rich people out there who believe in the existence and presence of aliens, and therefore we should too. Now, I understand that this is a fallacy and not concrete evidence, but I do believe that acknowledging these people's opinions and at least questioning why they might be thinking this way, well, that's important. Let's name off a few people who are currently obsessed with space travel and contacting aliens. Robert Bigelow, Elon Musk, Paul Allen, Yuri Milner, Jeff Bezos, Franklin Antonio. What do these gentlemen have in common? Well, they are all super rich and they are all fascinated with space and aliens. Now, this isn't proof of anything. This isn't evidence that says aliens are among us, but I do think that it's a sign. If I saw these men all investing in the same stock, then I would also invest in that same stock. If I saw all of these men looking at the same thing, and in this case aliens and space travel, and throwing billions of dollars at it, then I'd wonder to myself, why are they doing that? Well, they're probably doing that because they seem to think that aliens are in fact real and potentially are among us. I can comfortably acknowledge that every single one of those people that I listed is more intelligent than I am, and if every one of them are deeply invested in aliens, then I think that's a sign maybe we should be as well. And finally, number 1 on this list is the encounters. Sometimes we think of encounters with aliens as being few and far between, or that those who have had encounters with said aliens are off their rocker or aren't being truthful. Based on the amount of encounters that we've had and the individuals or groups involved in said encounters, both of those assumptions are categorically false. The fact of the matter is that there have been hundreds, thousands of encounters that humans have had with potential alien life throughout the years. Detailed accounts of everything that went down. Stuff that doesn't seem likely for someone to make up. Whether it be Barney and Betty Hill's abduction, Antonio Villas-Boas, the Foo Fighters, the Kecksburg UFO crash, Kenneth Arnold's incident, the Phoenix Lights, or any of the other many notable encounters that have happened in the past, no one can deny that people have been seeing aliens for quite a while. So picking an encounter at random, let's talk about the Travis Walton abduction. This is just another one of the many encounters that hit the big news after it happened. Intelligencer says, in 1975, a team of loggers claimed their 22-year-old co-worker, Travis Walton, disappeared for 5 days after a glowing disc in the Arizona woods zapped him with a bluish ray. Intrigued, he'd reportedly wandered underneath the hovering object and it abducted him. He claims he awoke on a table in a sterile-looking room surrounded by 3 well-developed fetuses wearing tan robes. He tried to flee, passed out, then regained consciousness only once the aliens had ditched him on the Arizona roadside. The news blew up when Walton was finally found. Apparently him and the group of guys passed lie detector tests, and Walton himself was taken to a hypnotist to try and see if he was lying, which he wasn't. So in this case, it's clear Walton at least wholeheartedly believes he's telling the truth. Also, if he wasn't telling the truth, or that's not what happened to him, then where the heck was he for 5 entire days? A guy just vanished off of the face of the planet for 5 days and is found walking along the roadside in Arizona later? Like, that doesn't just happen, folks. Due to the extensive amount of encounters and the detail to which the stories are described, how can we say without a doubt that aliens aren't living among us? I'll answer that for you. We can't.
At number 5 is advanced alien technology. Before you guys come at me and call me some sci-fi nut, hear me out. For aliens to get to Earth, they would need highly complex and state-of-the-art technology to create spacecrafts that safely take them from galaxy to galaxy. While this is something most people are aware of, the true nature of alien technology still remains a secret. In the momentous Grush hearing, he goes on to explain that the United States government is currently harboring and hiding alien technology and life. He claimed that the US has retrieved multiple crashed UFOs, some with aliens still inside, and upon retrieval, they picked them apart in order to research their technologies. However, we still have zero information on what exactly they've found and what futuristic technical knowledge they have attained. We have a general idea of the great danger that we may be in when in contact with an alien threat, but the full extent of that danger remains hidden. We can only assume that the US is in the process of deciphering the secrets to making our own UFOs, which we could use to explore other planets within and outside our solar system, and perhaps even colonize them. But we might not have to wait for very long before we discover what it is we know and what it is we don't know. Harvard professor Avi Loeb has been in Papua New Guinea investigating a meteor that crashed in the neighboring ocean in 2014. This specific meteor was of great interest, as when it crashed, it moved at speeds that are too fast for it to be gravitationally bound to the sun, and that the material it's made of was significantly tougher than that of other meteors. These traits indicate that the meteor could in fact be some sort of spacecraft or piece of alien technology. Upon finally finding the interstellar rock, Loeb and crew found microscopic, marble-like objects made of an alloy never before seen in our solar system. If these small marbles are confirmed to be artificial, then we could be stumbling upon the first confirmed pieces of genuine extraterrestrial technology. My theory? These are alien microplastics, or at least some sort of equivalent. The microscopic size of these marbles can indicate that these are only smaller, broken down versions of pre-existing technology or items that aliens might use. If this is the case, then hopefully scientists will find a way to reverse engineer these small alien spheres and discover their true origins. Coming up next, at number 4, is panspermia. Deriving from the ancient Greek words pan, meaning all, and sperma, meaning seed, panspermia is a hypothesis created by the Greek philosopher Anaxagoras in the 5th century BC. It states that life exists all across the universe, as it has been distributed by space dust, meteoroids, asteroids, and of course different spacecrafts carrying bacteria and other microorganisms. Hence the name panspermia. It means that the seeds of life are spread all across the universe. All, pan, seed, spermia, yeah, you get it. While the concept of panspermia emerged thousands of years ago, its relevance to our understanding of extraterrestrial life is as vibrant as ever. In recent space exploration missions, the European Space Agency's ExoMars rover and NASA's Perseverance rover have been equipped with instruments built specifically to analyze the surface of Mars for signs of life that has found itself on the planet through space dust, comets, and all those other fun space things. Furthermore, advancements in space exploration have led to discovery of something called extremophiles, resilient microorganisms that thrive in the extreme environments on Earth and other places in space. Their existence on Earth indicates that life can also thrive on the harsh environments of other planets. The most well-known example of an extremophile, you might have heard of them, is the tardigrade, better known as a water bear. These 8-legged microanimals are thought to be one of the most resilient life forms known. They are capable of surviving extreme temperatures, pressures, air deprivation, high amounts of radiation, dehydration, and starvation. In fact, tardigrades are so resilient that they're capable of surviving the cold, dark vacuum of space. If animals that can survive in space already exist on Earth, imagine how many other tardigrade-like species exist on other planets, opening the door for panspermia across the universe. Who knows, maybe there are plenty of extremophilic aliens on Earth already. We've just been looking in the wrong places. And at number 3 is going to be life on Mars. The existence of life on Mars is certainly not a new concept to anyone, especially with the discovery of water on the red planet, which is widely considered in the scientific community to be a necessary foundation for the development of life. However, even with all these findings, NASA claims to be incapable of finding actual life on Mars. But that might be because it's already found its way to Earth 13,000 years ago. Alan Hill's 84001, or just ALH 84001 for short, is an ancient meteorite discovered in Antarctica in 1984. The remarkable rock, ejected from the Martian surface 4.1 billion years ago, has offered many clues towards the existence of life hidden beneath our solar neighbor's surface. In 1996, a team of scientists led by David McKay of NASA's Johnson Space Center announced their discovery of intriguing fossil-like microstructures and features within the meteorite. These fossils imply that life on Mars did in fact exist, just long before humanity. And this isn't the only proof. In 1976, the United States landed 2 of their own Viking landers, making them the first US spacecrafts to land on the red planet. The crafts would be the first to take high-resolution images of the planet and analyze a variety of the planet's features. But most importantly, an examination of the Martian soil tested positive for metabolism, which heavily suggests the presence of life. Theories of them hiding the alien race to Martians having been long extinct, and that the red planet's desolate nature is caused by it being the ruins of a once vivacious planet. But what do you guys think? Is life currently on Mars? Has it already gone extinct? Or maybe there are already Martians hidden among us right now? Tell me in the comments. At number 2 is life across the solar system. Immanuel Kant, the renowned 18th century philosopher, posited a compelling argument regarding the potential existence of alien intelligence in his work titled Universal Natural History and Theory of the Heavens, which is probably the coolest book name ever, but I digress. Kant states that the universe is so vast that the existence of aliens is certain. I mean, there are just so many stars and planets that at least one of them has to sustain life, right? It was his ideas that laid the groundwork for modern discussions on the existence of extraterrestrial life. The Drake equation, formulated by astrophysicist Frank Drake in 1961, complements Kant's theories by providing a more mathematical approach to estimate the number of alien civilizations in our galaxy that might be capable of communication. The equation factors in various variables, such as the rate of star formation, the fraction of stars with planets, the number of habitable planets per star, the fraction of planets where life emerges, and the longevity of technologically advanced civilizations. With the hundreds of billions of stars within our galaxy, along with the recent discoveries of exoplanets around those stars, there are certainly countless habitable worlds scattered throughout the Milky Way. In fact, life could exist within our very solar system. Beyond just Mars and its many riverbeds and subsurface water ice, there's Enceladus and Titan, moons of Saturn. These moons both have subsurface oceans, lakes, rivers, and seas beneath their icy crusts, making them potential hotbeds for life. Some scientists have even observed on Titan that there may be living cells deep within its seas, making it home to several microbial Saturnian species. It's kind of a mouthful. Another theory of Kant's was that aliens' intelligence becomes more intelligent the further we are from the star that we orbit, meaning that planets like Mercury and Venus would not be likely to hold intelligent life, but planets like Saturn and Neptune hold highly intelligent life. Now, I don't mean to toot my own horn, but humans are already a very smart species. But if Kant's theory is correct, then that would make us the dumb ones in the solar system. Us, the dumb ones. What the hell? Anyway, at number 1 is the WOW signal. With the confirmation of alien life on Earth and its existence on other planets within our solar system, there is not a single doubt in my mind that aliens populate not only our galaxy, but the entire depths of space. However, what NASA doesn't want you to know is that we've actually been directly contacted by aliens nearly half a century ago. On August 15th, 1977, astronomer Jerry R. Ayman, I probably pronounced that wrong, would find something incredible while working on the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, or SETI for short, project at Ohio State University. Using the university's Big Ear radio telescope, he was able to intercept a mysterious and strong radio signal coming from the Sagittarius constellation, which lasted for 72 seconds and displayed characteristics suggesting an artificial source. Any Sag fans watching right now? The signal got its name because after Ayman discovered it, he would circle it and write "wow" in big letters next to it. What makes it so fascinating are its unique characteristics. It was a narrow band radio signal, meaning it was confined to a very specific range of radio frequencies. Natural cosmic sources do not emit signals in such a narrow range, making the signal's origin almost certainly alien. Moreover, the signal's intensity varied significantly during its brief appearance, suggesting a point source moving relative to the telescope. The immediate assumption at the time was that this signal was caused by a passing satellite, but extensive research and attempts to recreate the signal has shown that it is impossible to recreate by human means. Unfortunately, the signal was so seemingly random that it is undecipherable, and humanity has yet to receive such a signal since. But with all these aliens close to us already, I have no doubt the ones way far out will contact us again soon. Let's just cross our fingers and hope they're friendly. If one thing is certain, it's that we're going to be interacting with alien life a whole lot more in the near future, and I'm all here for it. But what about you guys? Does the very idea of talking to an alien make you froth at the mouth? Or are you more in the camp of not caring about aliens because life is already too busy to be worrying about these kinds of things? Either way, this seems to be an issue that will only get more and more prevalent as time passes.
In 5th place, we have a 2014 secret mission in Africa. At the time, a NASA official confirmed that one of the agency's aircrafts had been spotted on an American military airstrip in Eastern Africa, but like a series of US military officials, declined to say what the space agency's high-tech bird was doing there. Seriously, he gave the most legalese answer ever. Enjoy chuckling at this statement. I really can't give you any of the details. You know, the airplane was there, you see it in the picture, but I really can't tell you what it was for. A big from me. Anyone else? The broad-winged white plane belonging to the agency was photographed by the satellite company Digital Globe sitting next to some tilt-rotor aircraft at Camp Lemonnier in Djibouti. A NASA website that tracks the agency's 3 WB-57s shows that one of its planes, number 926, was on a foreign deployment from July to November of that year. A NASA handbook for the WB-57 posted online lists 14 international deployment sites for the aircraft around the world, but the American base that we just mentioned isn't one of them. The Pentagon declined to answer any questions about a NASA aircraft aircraft in Djibouti, and a spokesperson for the Air Force Space Command, which has a closer relationship with NASA, said they wouldn't have operational knowledge of a mission on the continent. AFRICOM, the U.S. military's Africa Command, would only say that aircraft from a variety of agencies and nations perform diverse missions from Camp Lemonnier in support of the U.S. and allied military peace and security operations in the region, which spans East Africa and the Mideast. A NASA spokesperson said that their WB-57 aircraft does a lot of work with a variety of different customers from the government, from industry, academia, including the Defense Department. Totally not suspicious at all. According to NASA's website, the WB-57s have been flying research missions since the early 1970s and continue to be an asset to the scientific community, with professional, reliable, customer-oriented service designed to meet all scientific objectives. A government website devoted to the converted old planes describes a mission in Costa Rica to explore the tropical upper troposphere and lower stratosphere, and another to collect cosmic dust from comets and asteroids in the Earth's upper atmosphere, among many others. A variation of the aircraft was used to gather air samples from above-ground nuclear tests conducted by other countries. Sure, only other countries. The military may be interested in more than just scientific objectives, since a plane can fly nearly as high as the famed U-2 spy plane and carry more weight, including an array of high-tech imagery and communications equipment. One previous mission was described by the head of the military's fringe tech specialists at the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency to the House Subcommittee on Intelligence as a kind of mass, three-dimensional terrain mapping. She said that a WB-57 was deployed to Afghanistan for a few months beginning late 2010 and collected over 70,000 square kilometers of terrain data, so information on about 10% of the country. This expert said she was confident the system could have mapped half the country. So a civilian who worked with the WB-57 program in Afghanistan and who asked not to be identified due to, reasons, told some folks that the plane is highly customizable, using sometimes one-off configurations depending on the objectives of the project. And for now, the military isn't saying any more. And whatever the mission was, it appears to be over. According to NASA, all 3 WB-57s are now back in the US, with their status listed as inactive. Let me know in the comments what y'all theories are as to why the plane was mysteriously in Africa. My guess, another Area 51 or Roswell incident that they wanted to keep covered up. In 4th place, the alligator problem. I don't really like talking about things that, off me, with, alligators, crocodiles, sharks, and spiders being a few that make me skittish, but for the sake of information, you folks are worth it. The Kennedy Space Center is full of the, scaly snappers. The center is located on Merritt Island, a small mass of land off of the east coast of Florida that isn't technically an island, but shh. Despite being the most famous landmark on the island, the NASA complex isn't the only thing there. There's the Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge, which is home to 1,000 species of plants and animals. They home a variety of sea turtles, manatees, bobcats, bald eagles, and more. Oh, and we can't forget about the gators. So maybe one of the reasons why the space shuttle program was canceled was because people didn't want to have to keep, clearing alligators off the runway every time a shuttle came into land. Honest to goodness. NASA has the ability to restrict human access to the site, should they need it, but how do you go about telling a man-eating reptile what to do? According to the agency, interactions between their staff and the gators is rare, but that's exactly what they would say. Next thing you know, they'll have hijacked a rocket. Okay, no. That was one thing I was very glad I didn't see when I took a vacation to Florida earlier this year, and I'd like to keep it that way, thank you very much. In 3rd place, we have the theft and use of moon rocks. If anyone has ever read the book Sex on the Moon by Ben Mesrick, then you'll already know the tale of Thad Roberts and his plan to do something very interesting with a bunch of stolen moon rocks. And for folks like myself who didn't know until today, buckle in for something I couldn't make up if I tried. So Thad was a high-flying NASA co-op student with dreams of obtaining multiple degrees and becoming an astronaut. Oh, and he also had dreams of stealing some of NASA's most prized possessions. With help from a team of accomplices, Thad stole 101 grams of moon rocks, valued at a simple little $20 million from NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. For reference, that's slightly less than like half a cup for measurements, and that's about, $20 million. That's more money than I'll see in my lifetime. And hey, if that wasn't bad enough, he also pilfered some dinosaur bones from his university. As a newly minted dino fact expert, I tried finding out what dino the bones were from, but sadly my searches turned up empty, so I'm begging. If anyone out there knows, please tell me in the comments. Thad reportedly laid the rocks out on his bed and proceeded to get down and dirty with his girlfriend on top of them, hence the whole sex on the moon thing. The young man and his fellow thieves were caught in an FBI sting when they were trying to sell the other rocks and were sentenced to time in jail. Just when I think I've seen it all around here, I somehow find myself getting surprised. Boinking on space rocks? Oh, before I move on, during this theft, Thad contaminated the rocks, making them virtually useless to the scientific community. He and his buddies also destroyed 3 decades worth of handwritten research notes by a NASA scientist that had been locked in the safe. The absolute selfishness on display. In second place, we have Viking lander aliens. A woman who claims to be a former NASA employee claims to have seen evidence of the most monumental cover-up in space history in 1979 as she saw two human figures in spacesuits walk calmly towards the Viking lander across the Martian surface. So going by Jackie, she claimed to have been working for NASA, handling downlink telemetry from the lander, which was the first vehicle to send back images of Mars' surface. She and 6 colleagues were watching the Viking rover bustling about over various screens when she spotted, yep, 2 men in spacesuits, which were not the bulky suits they normally used, but they looked protective. They came over the horizon, walking towards the Explorer. Now, naturally, some folks have claimed that the humans may have just been there to polish the lander's solar panels, and yeah, this is my judgy face. It seems a little odd, considering that if, there were humans there, presumably they could just fill the lander with petrol instead, or, take the photographs themselves. Jackie claims that while the folks were maintaining the equipment, their video feed was suddenly cut off without explanation, and when they rushed upstairs to another control room for answers, the door leading to the room controlling the equipment was locked, with paper taped over every crevice to avoid anything being seen. Hello, suspicious red flag alert. Yep, waving my imaginary one. If you don't understand how scary cover-ups are and why this is ranked so highly, then I worry about how blasé you are. Other theorists claim there were secret landings on Mars in the 60s, and the Apollo landings were actually a cover-up for wider exploration of the solar system. Former CIA pilot John Lear claims that NASA landed on Mars in 1966, and that humans adapted to breathe the thin Martian atmosphere. Nigel Watson, author of the Haynes UFO Investigations Manual, said that these accounts of secret space missions seem to be growing in number and remind him of the infamous Project Serpo. Yes, I'll sidetrack. In November of 2005, a contact called Anonymous, who said they worked for the US Defense Intelligence Agency, started sending information about an extraordinary alien exchange program called, Project Serpo. Basing his claims on a 3,000-page document written in the late 1970s, he boldly claimed that 6 aliens were recovered from the Roswell crash. Claims that aliens, living and or dead, were recovered from the Roswell crash are nothing new, but in this case it was stated that an alien survivor from the crash, called EBE-1, helped to organize 12 specially trained people to visit his home planet, Serpo, in the Zeta Reticuli solar system. This mission occurred in 1965, and they remained there until 1978. During their stay, 2 of them passed away, 2 remained on the planet, and the rest, after returning to Earth, have passed away because of the high levels of radiation they were exposed to on Serpo. I'm just saying, NASA has admitted that there are many things out there that we do not know about, and that UFOs are indeed real. So what else are they hiding? I swear, between them and the US government, I wish I could file like a million Freedom of Information pieces. In first place, we have Operation Paperclip. Alrighty, goofy word time. YouTube land doesn't really like a lot of the words to do with World War II, so bear with me while I talk about the Yahtzees and more. The Third Reich had built up a huge bank of scientists, engineers, and technicians over the course of World War II. And after, the conflict ended, the US wanted to use some of their knowledge for their own gain. Thus came Operation Paperclip, a plan to rehouse hundreds, if not thousands, of former Yahtzee scientists in the US and put them to work on various projects. One such project was, you guessed it, the early days of NASA. Conducted by the Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency, it was largely carried out by special agents of the US Army's Counterintelligence Corps. One of the people brought over in Operation Paperclip was Kurt DeBoos, a former V-2 rocket scientist. He was transferred over to NASA in 1960, and in just over 2 years was named to the first ever director of its launch operations center. From there, he oversaw hundreds of rocket launches and played a pivotal role in the preparations for the moon landings. At the time, President Truman spent 16 months before making his decision to approve Operation Paperclip. Several of the Paperclip scientists were later investigated because of their links with the Yahtzee Party during the war. Only one Paperclip scientist, George Rickey, was formally tried for any crime, and no Paperclip scientist was found guilty of any crime in the United States or Germany. Rickey was returned to Germany in 1947 to stand at the Dora trial, where he was acquitted. In 1951, weeks after his US arrival, Walter Schreiber was linked by the Boston Globe to human experiments conducted by Kurt Blohm at Ravensbrück, and to be safe, he immigrated to Argentina with the aid of the US military. In 1984, Arthur Rudolph, under perceived threat of prosecution relating to his connection as operations director for V-2 missile production to the use of forced labor from Middlework, renounced his US citizenship and moved to West Germany, which granted him citizenship. For 50 years, from 1963 to 2013, the Strughold Award, which was named after Hubertus Strughold, the father of space medicine, for his central role in developing innovations like the spacesuit and space life support systems, was the most prestigious award from the Space Medicine Association. On October 1st of 2013, in the aftermath aftermath of a Wall Street Journal article published on December 1st of 2012, which highlighted his connection to human experiments during World War II, the Space Medicine Association's executive committee announced that that award had been retired. Operation Paperclip remains a black mark against America's post-war activities, and NASA was unfortunately a part of it. It's a Nicky secret, one that doesn't get any easier to hear. In 5th place, we have Planet 9. So in April of 2016, the New York Post tweeted that a newly discovered planet could destroy Earth as soon as that month. Now, obviously we're all still here, unless we've been replaced by AI or holograms without my knowledge. Honestly, 2016 was the year I transitioned from high school to university, and 'twas a very chaotic year for me. The newspaper was referring to Planet 9, a theoretical planet at the edge of the solar system. Based on earlier considerations, this hypothetical super-Earth-sized planet would have had a predicted mass of 5 to 10 times that of the Earth, an elongated orbit 400 to 800 times as far from the Sun as the Earth. So expert astronomers have suggested that Planet 9 may be the core of a giant planet that was ejected from its original orbit by Jupiter during the genesis of the solar system, captured from another star, once a rogue planet, or that it formed on a distant orbit and was pulled into an eccentric orbit by a passing star. An accompanying video also claimed that the new planet would be throwing all sorts of asteroids and comets at Earth, which would supposedly end up pummeling our planet. Astronomers are actively looking for it to explain motions of some objects in the icy Kuiper Belt, a vast region of icy objects beyond Neptune. I tried to find a pronunciation for that word, couldn't find it, so if I'm wrong, let me know. And while sky surveys such as Wide Field Infrared Survey Explorer, otherwise known as WISE, and Pan-STARRS did not detect Planet 9, they have not ruled out the existence of a Neptune-diameter object in the outer solar system. When the planet is actually found, it will pose no threat to us, according to the California Institute of Technology's Mike Brown, who is one of the original backers of the Planet 9 theory. While it doesn't have an official moniker right now, it will likely be a name chosen from Roman or Greek mythology. Let me know in the comments what you think it should be, officially named. I personally think Dolos, the spirit of trickery, since NASA seems to want to keep this planet their little secret. In 4th place, we have the McMinnville UFO sighting. Widely regarded by UFOologists to have produced the most important photographs of a UFO, the McMinnville sighting became famous at the height of the 1950s UFO craze. Paul Trent captured the images on camera after his wife, Evelyn, spotted a slow-moving metal disc while feeding the rabbits on their farm. The images went on to be printed in Life magazine. The pair maintained that they had seen a genuine UFO until their deaths, repeating the tale for the Oregonian in 1997, year I was born. Now, before someone starts asking what this has to do with NASA, it absolutely has everything to do with them. They're the ones who cover up UFO sightings and proof. And if you remember, my last point, I'm pretty sure they have a hand in covering up government proof as well. Now, to elaborate on this event, Evelyn Trent started yelling for her husband at about 7:45 p.m. on the evening of May 11th, 1950. She was feeding the rabbits in the yard of the couple's Dayton farm when she saw what she described as a good-sized parachute canopy without the strings. Only silver, bright, mixed with bronze. She later elaborated that it was as pretty as anything she ever saw. Evelyn ran into the house, found her husband and their camera, and the duo raced back into the yard. Paul Trent also spotted what he described as a round, shiny, wingless object hovering in the sky. The 43-year-old farmer managed to take 2 photographs before the flying object disappeared into the evening mist. Fun fact, they're the most famous photos ever to come out of Yamhill County. The McMinnville Telephone Register and the Oregonian published the images in June of 1950, a month after Paul Trent took them. So the delay was because he had to finish off the roll before getting the images developed. Such a struggle sometimes. Life magazine followed the Oregon newspapers, offering its national audience, a gander at the unidentified flying object. Soon, because of this, a U.S. Air Force investigator came to the Trent farm, and while explaining the event to the officer, Paul said that the object was coming in towards them and seemed to be tipped up a little bit. He emphasized it was very bright, almost silvery, and made no noise. The investigator had heard such stories before, since once again, this was the golden age of UFO sightings. But while most alien craft tales are easily debunked after being discovered to be weather balloons or private planes or obvious hoaxes, that wasn't the case with the Trent's photos. In 1967, the Air Force commissioned prominent nuclear physicist Edward U. Condon to lead an exhaustive UFO study. The 950-page report, exhaustive, titled Scientific Study of Unidentified Flying Objects, easily dismissed most of the reported sightings, but it stated at least one, showing a disc-shaped object in flight over Oregon, is classed as difficult to explain in a conventional way. The study determined that the photos were genuine and the Trents were truthful. It specifically declared that this is one of the few UFO reports in which all factors investigated from genetic to psychological and physical appear to be consistent with the assertion that an extraordinary flying object, silvery metallic disc-shaped, tens of meters in diameter, and evidently something, flew within sight of 2 credible witnesses. So explain to me why NASA has never released a statement on this? They're keeping pretty dang quiet, and so is everyone else. What can I say? Secrets make me cranky. In third place, we have life on Venus. So back in the 1970s and 1980s, the Soviet Union sent several uncrewed missions to study the planet Venus. 10 of these Venera probes landed on the surface of the planet and were able to transmit data and images for a few minutes before succumbing to the planet's extreme atmosphere. In 2012, the Russian news service RIA Novosti reported that Leonid, I cannot say his last name but it starts with a K, a scientist who worked on the Venera missions, suggested that the photographs showed living objects moving around on the planet's surface. According to Leonid, certain objects resembled a disk, a black flap, and a scorpion, which emerge, fluctuate, and disappear, referring to their changing location on photographs and traces on the ground. The editors of Solar System Research published an editorial comment and a number of commentary articles from other scientists in their September of 2012 publication of Issue 5, Volume 46 of the journal, to be specific. The issue also includes a second article from Leonid, in which he claims to identify several other life forms and speculates regarding the apparent rich diversity of life around the landing site. It's a lot more rare to get alien spottings from folks outside of the US, and I feel like NASA is just out there covering them up. So I'm glad this one made it to the interwebs, even though folks have tried to explain it away. In second place, we have a government whistleblower. Alrighty. Before I get into it, I'd like to elaborate on how credible this story is. So, the whistleblower in question, David Charles Grush, is a veteran of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, or NGA, and the National Reconnaissance Office, NRO for short, where he served as a representative to the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force from 2019 to 2021. From late 2021 to July of 2022, he was the NGA co-lead for UAP analysis and its representative to the task force led by the Department of the Navy, under the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security. Whew. At the NGO, David served as a Senior Intelligence Capabilities Integration Officer, cleared at the top secret compartment information level. From 2016 to 2021, he served with the National Reconnaissance Office as Senior Intelligence Officer and led the production of the NRO Director's Daily Briefing. He was a GS-15 civilian, the military equivalent of a colonel, and has numerous awards and decorations for his participation in covert and clandestine operations to advance American security. I don't know about y'all, but I think this is our most credible witness yet. So David said the recoveries of partial fragments through and up to intact vehicles have been made for decades through present day by the government, its allies, and defense contractors. He said that craft recovery operations are ongoing at various levels of activity, and that individuals on these UAP programs have approached him in his official capacity and disclosed their concerns regarding a multitude of wrongdoings, such as illegal contracting against the federal acquisitions regulations, and other criminality and the suppression of information across a qualified industrial base and academia. Associates who vouched for David said his information was highly sensitive, providing evidence that materials from objects of non-human origin are in the possession of highly secret black government programs. Wow. Multiple government witnesses to boot. Although locations, program names, and other specific data remain classified, the Inspector General and Intelligence Committee staff were provided with these details. Analysis has determined that the objects retrieved are of non-human origin based on the vehicle morphologies and material science testing and the possession of unique atomic arrangements and radiological signatures. The investigation was centered on extensive interviews with high-level intelligence officials, some of whom are directly involved with the program, and they corroborated his information. David is certain that the information has been illegally withheld from Congress to intentionally thwart legitimate congressional oversight of the UAP program. He has also filed a complaint alleging that he suffered illegal retaliation for his confidential disclosures. In his statements, David claimed that UFO legacy programs have, long been concealed within multiple agencies, nesting UAP activities in conventional secret access programs, without appropriate reporting to various oversight authorities. According to the unclassified complaint, in July of 2021, he had confidentially provided classified information to the Department of Defense Inspector General concerning the withholding of UAP-related information from Congress. Christopher Mellon, who spent nearly 20 years in the U.S. intelligence community and served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, has worked with Congress for years on unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP for short. He has mentioned that a number of well-placed current and former officials have shared detailed information with him, including the location where a craft was abandoned and recovered. He claims the reason more folks haven't come forward is due to a lack of trust in the leadership of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, established by Congress. The assumption that the United States alone has bullied the other nations into maintaining the secrecy for nearly a century continues to uphold hold as the primary consensus amongst the public at large. So you're telling me that credible US government officials have been adamant that the government is hiding things? Sounds right to me. In first place, we have Viking lander aliens. A woman who claims to be a former NASA employee claims to have seen evidence of the most monumental cover-up in space history back in 1979, when she saw two human figures in spacesuits walk calmly towards the Viking lander across the Martian surface. Going by Jackie, she claimed to have been working for NASA, handling downlink telemetry from the lander, which was the first vehicle to send back images of Mars' surface, when she saw two people walking on the surface. She and 6 colleagues were watching the Viking rover, bustling about all over various screens when she spotted 2 men in spacesuits, which were not the bulky suits that they normally used at the time, but looked safe. They came over the horizon, walking, right to the Viking Explorer. Naturally, some folks have claimed that the humans may have just been there to polish the lander's solar panels, but that seems a little odd, considering if there were, just humans there, they could have just filled the lander with petrol instead, or take the photographs themselves. Jackie claims that while the folks were maintaining the equipment, their video feed was suddenly cut off without explanation, and when they rushed upstairs for answers, the door leading to the room controlling the equipment was locked, with paper taped over every crevice to avoid anything being seen. Hello? Suspicious red flag alert. If you don't understand how scary cover-ups are and why this is ranked so highly, then I worry about how blasé you are. Other theorists claim there were secret landings on Mars in the 60s, and the Apollo landings were actually a cover-up for wider exploration of the solar system. Former CIA pilot John Lear claims that NASA landed on Mars in 1966, and that humans adapted to breathe the thin Martian atmosphere. Nigel Watson, author of the Haynes UFO Investigations Manual, said that these accounts of secret space missions seem to be growing in number, and remind him of the infamous Project Serpo. Yep, I'll sidetrack. In November of 2005, a contact called Anonymous, who said they worked for the US Defense Intelligence Agency, started sending information about an extraordinary alien exchange program called Project Serpo. Basing his claims on a 3,000-page document written in the late 1970s, he boldly claimed that 6 aliens were recovered from the Roswell crash. Claims that aliens living and or dead were recovered from the Roswell crash are nothing new, but in this case it was stated that an alien survivor from the crash, called EBE-1, helped to organize 12 specially trained people to visit his home planet, Serpo, in the Zeta Reticuli solar system. This mission occurred in 1965, and they remained there until 1978. During their stay, 2 of them died, 2 remained on the planet, and the rest, after returning to Earth, have died because of the high levels of radiation they were exposed to. I'm just saying, NASA has admitted that there are many things out there that we do not know about, and that UFOs are indeed real. So, what other secrets are they hiding? I swear between them and the US government, I wish I could file a million Freedom of Information pieces.
Starting at number 5, we have Martians. I know, mentioning Martians sounds crazy, but hear me out. Over the many years of Mars rovers exploring the red planet, NASA has gathered a plethora of information and footage, and within that footage, could be proof of alien life. If you look closely in some photos taken by NASA's many rovers, you can actually see some dark streaks, which may at first look like a shadow, but are in fact flowing water. And this isn't just some screwball theory. NASA themselves has confirmed the existence of water on Mars. Scientists say that the main reason life could be sustained on Earth in the first place was the presence of water. So, the chances of there being life on Mars is actually quite high. On top of this, there have been findings of strange rock formations and human-like figures found on Mars, perhaps pointing to proof of advanced life forms. The implications of there being life on Mars is grave. If humans were to go to Mars and meet these aliens, we could be putting ourselves or them in danger. There's a very real chance that any potential Martians are hostile towards humans and could harm them. Another issue could be disease. If a human were to contract an alien disease, our immune systems would not be prepared to deal with it, and it could lead to death. The same problem exists for Martians, who we don't want to endanger. Aliens are way too cool to die. But that's not the worst of it. Next up at number 4 is Mars's intense radiation. One big problem with Mars is that it doesn't have what is called a magnetosphere, which is pretty much the parts in and around a planet that contain its magnetic field. What this field does is protect us from the sun's radiation. Earth has one, and that's why we only have to wear sunscreen when the sun is out. Mars doesn't. And if that isn't enough, Mars is regularly exposed to cosmic rays and solar flares and winds, causing the planet to be even more irradiated. A study by the European Space Agency finds that someone on a mission to Mars would receive a radiation dosage 700 times stronger than what you would on Earth. Long time or extreme exposure to radiation can cause all sorts of effects, like the loss of hair, acute illness, seizures, terrifying mutations, death, and in Spider-Man's case, the ability to climb on walls. Of course, you wouldn't really get superpowers if you were irradiated, unless you call heart failure a superpower. Physicists actually say that 1 day in space is equivalent to the radiation received on Earth for a whole year. Apart from astronauts on the International Space Station, humans are very rarely exposed to such high levels of radiation, so the long-term effects of space radiation are still somewhat of a mystery. With this much danger and uncertainty surrounding radiation, it's not worth the risk of sending humans to the red planet. So unless you've got some SPF 1 million, I wouldn't recommend tanning on Mars anytime soon, and NASA wouldn't either. And to make things even worse, constant solar winds over time have made Mars's atmosphere incredibly thin, which exposes humans to, you guessed it, even more radiation. Speaking of, Mars's atmosphere is going to be coming in at number 3. Much like our own planet, Mars has an atmosphere, weather, and some beautiful views. However, none of what Mars has is at all like what we have here on Earth. First of all, its atmosphere is composed of different elements than ours. Earth's atmosphere is mostly nitrogen, oxygen, and it's got a little bit of argon, a little bit of water vapor, touch of carbon dioxide. Mars's atmosphere, on the other hand, is 95% carbon dioxide and has trace amounts of nitrogen, oxygen, methane, and other gases. The most glaring difference in the two atmospheres is the amount of carbon dioxide there is compared to oxygen and nitrogen. The difference is a major reason for why us Earthlings wouldn't last a second on Mars without a spacesuit. As humans, we need oxygen to breathe. When we inhale, we take oxygen from the air and use it to fuel our bodies. When we exhale, all the other gases come out, as our body has no use for it. Most of what we exhale is carbon dioxide. So when put on a planet which has an atmosphere that's almost entirely composed of the gas that our body gets rid of, and has barely any of the one we need to function, things go bad quickly. Even if you were able to breathe carbon dioxide, Mars's air is so full of dust that you would still be short of breath. And that's not all. The air on Mars is also extremely thin. The standard air pressure on Earth is 1,013 millibars. On Mars, the surface pressure averages to 7. That's less than 1% of the air pressure on Earth. When under such low pressures, the human body reacts in horrifying ways, such as extreme swelling, lung rupture, and bruising. But worst of all, Mars's low pressure will cause a fatal condition called ebulism, which causes every liquid in your body to boil. It doesn't even have to be hot on Mars for this to happen. You would boil regardless of temperature, which, yeah, is a pretty good reason to stay on Earth. A mix of suffocation and bubbly bodily fluids are a dynamic duo when it comes to Mars's unsurvivable atmosphere. But what many fail to recognize is the danger of number 2, Mars's brutal temperatures. If you've ever seen a photo of Mars, you would know the planet is pretty much just one big desert. And call me crazy, but that screams that this planet is super hot to me. But in fact, the opposite is true. Yes, that's right. Mars is actually an incredibly cold planet. In fact, its temperatures get so low, they can prove fatal. Now, in all fairness, this isn't all the time. Mars can reach temperatures as high as 20 degrees Celsius, which is 70 degrees Fahrenheit. It's a pleasant temperature, caused mostly by the heat of the sun. But when the sun goes down, you're gonna regret not packing a thicker coat, as the desert planet's temperatures can get as low as minus 153 degrees Celsius, which is minus 225 degrees Fahrenheit. The lowest recorded temperature on Earth was minus 89 degrees Celsius, which is minus 129 degrees Fahrenheit, and that was in Antarctica. The temperature known as absolute zero, which is a temperature that is so cold that it is physically impossible to reach it by natural means, is only about minus 273 degrees Celsius, which is minus 460 Fahrenheit. That means that Mars's coldest temperatures are actually closer to absolute zero than they are to its warmest temperatures. And that's just nighttime. Mars, like Earth, has seasons, and when Mars reaches winter, it gets bone chilling. Snow, ice, frost, you name it. It covers the planet during Martian winters, getting several feet of snow. And because of its thin, carbon dioxide-rich atmosphere, it actually snows dry ice. Because dry ice is made up of carbon dioxide, as it lands and turns back into a gas through sublimation, it fills the air with even more carbon dioxide, creating a cold breathing hazard for humans. On top of all this, during the winter, air pressure drops greatly, proving Mars to be a near impossible planet to visit as a human. The cold, barren wasteland that is Mars is certainly a mighty place to fear. But the scariest reason NASA won't send people to Mars is number 1 on this list. It's its toxic dust storms. If you were wondering what makes the red planet so red, the answer is Mars's surplus of dust. There's actually so much dust on Mars that it gets kicked up into the atmosphere, making it appear red. On Earth, we have hurricanes, but on Mars they have dust storms. If you've seen The Martian, then you would know that these dust storms can reach hundreds of feet in height and will lay waste to anything in its path. In the movie, the storm is seen ripping apart an antenna, some equipment, and the astronauts' camp. How it looks in the movie isn't that far off from reality, and that one was one of the lighter dust storms. About annually, Mars will face dust storms that reach the size the equivalent to entire continents on Earth. These storms are not only much bigger than the usual ones, but are also far more intense. And very rarely, a bunch of normal storms will come together and grow into a planet-encircling dust storm, or as NASA calls them, global dust storms. These global dust storms are as unpredictable as they are dangerous. The damage these storms would do to a human or human colony is immeasurable. Not only that, but they would make the simple act of going to Mars difficult, as the large masses of dust swirling around could reduce visibility and disrupt flight paths. With how common these storms are, they also have a great potential to disconnect communication between Earth and Mars, jeopardizing any astronaut trying to traverse the solar system's dustiest planet. Which is why Mars is so scary, because it doesn't even take that much to put you in danger, as Mars also has small invisible dust storms called dust devils. While they have no correlation to the actual devil, thank God, they still prove to be a formidable threat. Their erratic nature and unpredictable paths can disrupt all sorts of equipment, rovers, and people alike. From the sounds of it, Earth's mission to Mars won't be happening anytime soon. We can only hope that conditions improve on the red planet. But considering it's been this way for millions of years, I have high doubts.
Number 5. Weird signal from the Milky Way. Astronomers have been studying fast radio bursts, or FRBs, that's a little acronym there to make me sound smart, for decades outside of our galaxy in the hopes of someday making some contact with our extraterrestrial friends and saying hello. Well, decades of research might have paid off when on April 28th, 2020, 2 ground-based radio telescopes discovered an intense pulse of radio waves within the Milky Way. This event was the first time an FRB had ever been detected within the galaxy, and somehow, despite this burst only lasting for a millisecond, it was apparently almost impossible to miss. I know what all of these words mean for sure. The burst was 30,000 light years away from Earth, so, about a stone's throw up that way, really just a block away on the cosmic scale. It was first discovered by the CHIME, a fancy acronym for the Canadian Hydrogen Intensity Mapping Experiment, as well as another project, the STARE, the Survey for Transient Astronomical Radio Emission. I just woke up, man, and I don't really know what these acronyms mean either, but I'm having a lot of fun saying them for you, and I hope you enjoy that. This discovery was notable as well for being the most energetic radio blast these astronomers have ever seen, but it was also one of the closest. Usually when we're talking about radio frequencies all the way up in space, these things are like billions of years of light years away, which does not make them particularly easy to study. You're getting a real far away glance. But if there's one on our doorstep, way easier to focus on. So what is this weird signal coming out of the Milky Way? Is this aliens trying to send a text and the reception's a bit foggy? Here's the trouble. Astronomers don't know for sure just yet. 3 years later, we are still not 100%. There is a small possibility, a disappointing one, that this signal could be man-made somehow and it's broadcasting all the way out here. But if not, this could very well be a promising sign of life from across the galaxy. And if you're looking for more alien content, we have got more UFO sightings than probably any other YouTube channel on this site, and I'm pretty sure of that. But if space stuff ain't your jam, we got cryptids, monsters, mythologies, true crime, fake crime, stories too good to be true and too true to be good. So click through, stay subscribed, stay screaming, and stay watching this video, okay? All the way to the end. I got a little surprise for you, I promise. Alright, moving on. Number 4, the sounds of Ganymede. Have you ever heard a planet talk? I don't mean like going for a hike and communing with trees and talking to nature or anything like that, man, okay? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about literally hearing the sounds a planet produces. Now you're gonna have to bear with me because I don't know if you can tell by looking at me, but I am not a rocket scientist. I'm barely even a YouTube host. But as I understand, when Juno, a NASA satellite, was orbiting Ganymede, one of Jupiter's moons, NASA discovered that Ganymede had its own magnetosphere. Ganymede was radiating this strange plasma wave of energy that when is recorded and played back sounds absolutely terrifying. This really like tickles the H.P. Lovecraft fan in my heart to be able to hear the sounds a planet is making out in the cosmos. So we're gonna play it for you now. Just take a listen to the audio of this and try to ever sleep again. I dare you. Now, I found that pretty scary personally. I don't know, reminds me of my insignificance in the galaxy. But more than a few people on YouTube pointed out, if you just close your eyes and imagine that that's R2-D2 making all of those noises, it's not particularly scary at all. And I'm probably never gonna be able to unhear that. So is this proof of alien life hiding out inside of Jupiter's moon? Well, not quite. This is a natural phenomenon. It's definitely mysterious though, and it makes you think about the size of the cosmos and how small we are on a galactic scale, but other than that, this thing coming from Ganymede is explainable, if not a little bit confusing. I just wanted to toss it like smack dab in the middle of this list about alien speculation to keep things a little fun, fresh, and flirty for everybody. Number 3, the USS Jellyfish. That's a fun name, isn't it? That's kind of fun. The USS Jellyfish kind of calls to mind like a big ship, maybe like a cruise ship, taking an all-included trip through the Bahamas. Well, not to burst your dreams of an island getaway, but the actual USS Jellyfish is a celestial object that astronomers have found that has had them asking questions that are really stinging. That was forced. That was really forced. That was not natural at all. I'm sorry. The USS Jellyfish is a giant mass of plasma that has taken the shape of a jellyfish. At least that's the best way we can see it. It's kind of like an ink blot test. You see what you want to see. It's some 300 million light years away and is a fancy radio signal called a polyphenix, which is a term scientists use for a radio frequency up in space that they don't really have all the answers about. The giant blob in particular is so unusual that when astronomers initially discovered it, they were writing it off completely, assuming it was an accident or an error in their data. The researcher who first discovered it, one Torrance Hodgson, captured the subject in 2017 using the Murchison Wide Array, an incredibly powerful Australian ground telescope. And when he wrote on the subject, he told his colleagues, ignore the obvious bug in this data. And it was only when they were really pushing that they began to notice there was something more to it than these formal studies earlier suggested. Now, I'm gonna be honest. The full-scale implications of the space jellyfish are a little bit above my pay grade. I can kind of just look at it and be like, well, that's kind of weird. I can read to you the scientists, theories for what they think created the jellyfish, but just know I only kind of half know what I'm talking about here. Scientists believe that the jellyfish was formed over the course of 2 billion years, structured smack dab in the middle between two galaxies that have been spewing out enormous amounts of light and plasma due to intense interactions between black holes and any materials that end up falling around them, eventually creating one gigantic cosmic jellyfish floating around in the astral planes. Number 2, something unusual. Recently, a team of astronomers discovered something unusual while they were mapping out the universe, which is my favorite start to a point I have ever read on this channel. You guys know when you're mapping out the universe, then you accidentally see something unusual? Ugh, I absolutely hate when that happens. Anyway, this mysterious unusual object floats about 4,000 light years away, very close by. You can practically wave and see it, and it's pulsing strange bursts of energy out of it roughly every 20 minutes on the dot. You can set your watch to this. Somebody up in space forget to turn the oven timer off? Natasha Hurley-Walker is an astrophysicist from the Curtin University in Australia, same university that discovered that jellyfish coincidentally, and was the leading researcher on this study. She said in a public statement that this object was appearing and disappearing over a few hours during our observations, and said that it was completely unexpected. It was kind of spooky for an astronomer because there's nothing known in the sky that does that. Let me take over for a second right here and tell you right now, on Top 5 Scary, if you can't tell what something weird is in the sky, it's an alien. Okay? You got an alien on your hands. So we have to assume that's what's going on here. Alongside this bizarre cosmic alarm clock, the team discovered a fossil plasma source, something that was created by powerful blasts of a bygone black hole that has since faded into the darkness. And I loved saying that. A black hole that has faded into the darkness? That's poetic. Does that not sound like where the heart of like cosmic evil in the universe would be? Does that not sound a little bit like it's something out of a Lovecraft or Stephen King book? A fossilized plasma created by the blast of a black hole that has faded into the darkness? That sounds like something a guy in a black robe would read out as part of a prophecy for the end of the universe. At number 1, Proxima Centauri. If there was ever going to be concrete signs of alien life, I think it would definitely come from a place called Proxima Centauri. Listen to that. That already sounds like it's from like a great Deep Space Nine episode. Recently, astronomers exploring for signs of life beyond Earth discovered a currently unexplained radio signal that was broadcasting from Proxima Centauri, a small red star roughly 4.2 million light years away. That's like right next door, man. If this wasn't exciting enough for you, there's radio signals coming from a strange star that no one can explain, seemingly. And surrounding these stars is a planet that NASA believes has a temperate and rocky surface just like our beautiful Earth, leading to some wild speculation all around. The project is dubbed Breakthrough Listen, very cool code name, and it was a decade-long search for alien broadcasts from the nearest million stars, just in case anybody's been trying to reach us about our planet's extended warranty. This radio signal in question has been formally dubbed BLC-1 when referred to scientifically. Now, this signal was first discovered in May 2019. It's not quite the be-all and end-all proof of aliens just yet, as much as I want it to be. Sophia Sheik, the team member leading Breakthrough Listen, says she suspects that the broadcast could end up being human in origin somehow, theorizing that it could be something as simple as like a plane traveling overhead their equipment or faulty electronics somewhere getting wires tangled. Would that not be beyond embarrassing if you're a group of scientists, astronomers, and you think you've found proof of alien life, but all it is somebody forgot to take their phone off airplane mode and they've just been getting notifications for Candy Crush and it's messing with your equipment? Still, it's something to research, and it's still one of the most exciting things to happen in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence in a long time. And I hope we keep looking for extraterrestrial intelligence out there, because there sure ain't anybody down here. I messed up that joke.
Number 5 on this list is the Fermi Paradox. This one is all about aliens, but maybe not how you might expect. Science Focus says, in 1950, Enrico Fermi, the man who built the first nuclear reactor, was having lunch in the canteen of the Los Alamos Bomb Lab in New Mexico when he suddenly said, "Where is everybody?" Everyone around the table knew exactly what he meant. Decades later, Fermi's question was examined independently by the American physicists Michael Hart and Frank Tipler. Hart considered aliens spreading throughout our Milky Way, and Tipler considered self-replicating machines that, on arrival at a planetary system, exploit the resources to build 2 copies of themselves that continue voyaging. Both concluded that even at modest speeds of travel, every star in the galaxy would be visited in a fraction of the age of the Milky Way. As Fermi realized, the aliens should be here on Earth. They do not appear to be, though. This became the Fermi Paradox. Hundreds of explanations have been proposed. They include the ideas that we are the first intelligence to arise in the galaxy and so are totally alone, and that we are a nursery world off limits to advanced civilizations that might adversely affect our development. A more mundane possibility is that there is no paradox because any signs of visitation in the distant past would be erased by wind, rain, and geological processes. Recently, however, a team led by Dr. Jonathan Carroll Nellenbach of the University of Rochester, New York, has proposed that our sun may simply have been bypassed by a wave of extraterrestrial expansion. So why are aliens not here? Have they already been here and we didn't even know? Or did they just bypass our solar system altogether? Or is all of this nonsense and the universe is just so big that they haven't gotten to us yet? It's certainly something interesting to think about. Considering the universe is infinite and there are so many places and planets we don't know about, it seems ridiculous to think that we're the only intelligent life or the first intelligent life in everything. Like, that's as if we hit the biggest lottery ever. Comment down below what you think about this alien question and why aren't they here yet? Number 4 on this list is dark matter. You've definitely heard the term dark matter get thrown around a bunch before, and you've probably wondered, what the heck is it? Well, if that sounds like you, then you aren't alone. Scientists all across the globe are still wondering what dark matter is and the purpose that it serves. Science Focus says dark matter gives out no light or too little light for us to detect. We know it exists because we see the effect of its gravity on the visible stars and galaxies. For instance, The Milky Way could not have dragged in enough matter to make it stars in the 13.82 billion years since the Big Bang. Without there being a lot of invisible matter whose extra gravity speeded things up. The European Space Agency's Planck satellite found that dark matter accounts for 26.8% of the mass energy of the universe, compared with the 4.3% of normal atomic energy. It therefore outweighs the visible stars and galaxies by a factor of 6. Puzzlingly, no Earth-based experiment has found any evidence of dark matter despite decades of searching. It is conceivable that it's not our theory of matter that needs modification, but our theory of gravity. Or that dark matter is not a fluid made of a single particle, but is complex like the atomic matter we see around us. Maybe the universe is filled with dark stars and dark planets and dark life. There is an entire universe of dark matter that we don't even know about. Like, what the heck is this stuff and what's it composed of? Why can't our eyes see it? Why doesn't something this dense even show up? It's all very confusing and nobody can figure it out right now. Dark matter is one of the biggest mysteries in the universe, and understanding what it is and how it works could completely change our understanding of gravity and matter as a whole. Hopefully NASA can get a grasp on it soon and the mystery can finally be solved. Number 3 on this list is the central black hole. At the center of almost every single known galaxy in the universe, which there are about 2 trillion of, there is a huge black hole just chilling in the middle. These aren't your everyday typical black holes though, they are gargantuan in size and weight. Some of these beasts weigh around 50 billion times that of our sun. Just an absolutely insane number that our brains truly can't really comprehend. But how did this absolute unit of a black hole get there, and why is it so big? Well, NASA doesn't really know, and they are desperately trying to find out. Black holes are one of the most interesting things in our universe, and one of the things that we know very little about. The question of where does a black hole actually go to will probably never be answered, because we'll never be able to go inside without getting completely crushed into oblivion. But figuring out why they're in the middle of pretty much every notable galaxy is important. If we can understand this, then we can understand how a galaxy is formed and potentially the lifespan of certain galaxies. Also, knowing what creates these black holes will help us better understand them and see if our planet will ever be at risk of such a disaster. Granted, maybe ignorance is bliss in this case, because even if we knew a black hole was coming, there's really nothing that we'd be able to do about it. Number 2 on this list is dark energy. For a long time, the only force that was thought to be operating on the entire universe was gravity. This was everywhere in the universe and decided pretty much how things played out. Gravity is not alone anymore though, or at least since the discovery of dark energy. Dark energy is this invisible force that is everywhere in the universe and is partially responsible for speeding up the expansion of said universe. Apparently this energy overtook gravity 5 billion years ago as the dominant force that's expanding the universe, and that's why it's happening in the first place. The thing is, we have no idea what this dark energy is or why it's here. Similar to dark matter, it feels like this has just appeared, and because we can't see it or have no idea of its origin, we have no idea how much weight it really has on us and our current laws of physics. Apparently 2/3 of the energy mass of the universe is made up of this stuff, and we have no idea about it. That's kind of scary if you think about it, and it puts in perspective how little we know about things. Oftentimes, I think we fall into a trap assuming that our species is far more advanced than it actually is, but when you consider that we have no idea where 2/3 of the energy mass in our universe came from, or what it is, it really brings you back to reality. I feel like this might be one of the hardest mysteries on this list to solve, and it's gonna take a while. And number 1 on this list is the multiverse. What seems to be the staple of a plotline of any good sci-fi movie these days is the multiverse, something that we truly know nothing about. The theory is basically that there is an infinite number of universes with an infinite number of possibilities and outcomes, and it's all just freaking infinite and honestly kind of hurts my brain to think about for very long. But is there any substance to this theory? How will we be able to know if it's true or not, and what would that mean for us? So the multiverse theory all comes from another theory called inflation theory. Inflation theory is the thinking that in basically a second, when our universe was just a baby, everything started inflating and growing super fast, expanding outwards in all directions. Now, it's thought that the inflation of our universe stopped 14 billion years ago, but that when our universe stopped, the beginning of another started, and so on and so forth. It's very complicated, and in all honesty, I don't really understand all of it, but that's the bare bones. There's also the thinking that because life is so hard to support, as in you need so many things to go right in the universe, it seems extremely unlikely that if there is only one universe, life would have actually formed. If there were multiple or infinite universes, there would be enough chances though that one or more are bound to have the necessary things to create life. Either way, if this is true, then it obviously changes a lot of things about how we view our universe and the role we play in it. Maybe there's another version of you just chilling in a totally alternate universe right now, except instead of hands you have wings or something. A little ridiculous, I know, but if universes are infinite, then you never know.
Number 5. Leland Melvin. American engineer and now retired NASA astronaut Leland Melvin has spent hundreds of hours in space. Literally hundreds. Leland holds 4 honorary doctorates for his service in education, the sciences, and philanthropy. Doctorates. I'm just saying that before the comments start rolling in saying he's just another wacko. He's crazy. They're not wackos, people. Any of them. They've been screened so many times by so many people with so many tests, they have to be damn well near perfect before going up on or in NASA's budget. Before his career with NASA, Leland was actually All-American for football. Detroit Lions, Toronto Argos. Guy made the NFL and then said, you know what? I think I'm gonna be an astronaut. Like, give this guy a Netflix movie, would ya? He was selected by NASA in 1998 after getting injured with a football career. Guy goes from the turf to working at NASA Langley Center. This guy's put in time, both down here and up there. Mission after mission with NASA. He's got quite the practice at the whole floating around thing. When Leland was pressed about otherworldly visitors and his ideas about the cosmos, he said this when he was working up in orbit. He had seen something translucent, curved and organic looking when he was working with fellow astronaut Randy Bresnik. The pair of them, again, called down to NASA to ask what it could be. NASA's official response was probably ice. Yeah, nice and specific there, Houston. Thank you for that. When has NASA ever said probably? Melvin dismissed this and figured it was NASA's explanation to just cover it up. Like, who's more qualified here? That's all I'm asking. When the most qualified people are like, yeah, I can't tell if that's frozen water or a full-on mothership, Houston. Either they shouldn't be up there at all, or we need some more Windex on those windows there, NASA. Huh? Number 4. Ivan Wagner. As always, if you dig what we do here at Top 5 Scary, make sure you hit that like button or comment down below. It really helps the channel out. Have you ever seen a UFO out there? Yeah, you. Have you seen one? Comment down below with some details about your experiences. I know I have. Twice now. Hence the obsession with all this stuff. Those Reddit rabbit holes, boy oh boy. Speaking of falling into a wormhole of conspiracy and who said what, astronaut Ivan Wagner, or I should say cosmonaut Ivan Wagner, since he's Russian by birth, and although he's bunking up with some roomies up there in the ISS, he was on the ISS as a first timer just back in 2020. Does NASA initiate rookies up there? Like pull pranks on the newbies? Like no gravity, just unbuckle you while you sleep, flow you out, you know? He and fellow Russian Anatoly Ivanishin were working up there alongside Chris Cassidy, the American commander of said expedition. When Wagner was orbiting the Earth, he might have captured some footage of UFOs, better known as UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. It's the jargon nowadays. The aurora lights behind Earth's beautiful curves was being recorded from the ISS when he saw a string of really weird lights moving in a really weird way. He labeled the video Space Guests. Wagner tweeted the vid, which apparently shows the aurora australis near Antarctica, and then all of a sudden this blob of organized lights just cruises on over the globe. Looks like a blob of like glitter just trucking across space. Like, what is that? Of course NASA didn't follow up. Like, what are they gonna say? Oh yeah, those are stars that move and blink, I think. I mean, no? Space junk. Yeah, space debris and swamps and things. Also, what a lame excuse. Space junk? Okay, so you're saying there's lots of litter up there? That's what you're saying? That's what just zipped over my house silently, defying gravity and lasered up my cow? Yeah, I don't think so, NASA. Number 3. Chris Hadfield. Retired Canadian astronaut, engineer, fighter pilot, and musician. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Hadfield flew 2 missions and also served as commander on the International Space Station. Before his career as an astronaut, he served in the Canadian Armed Forces for 25 years as an air commander fighter pilot. So he has the credentials to say the least. In 1992, Hadfield was accepted into the Canadian astronaut program. He first flew in space in 1995, and since then, he says he's seen tons of stuff up there just zipping around that even a man with all those credentials says he can't explain. Quote, "I've seen countless things in the sky, but he has a pretty cool take on it. He doesn't keep it on the DL, he doesn't boast, and he doesn't panic. Seems like Chris has the mentality like, quote, to see something in the sky that you don't understand and then to immediately conclude it's intelligent life from another solar system is the height of foolishness and lack of logic. However, Chris seems to have a little dirt on Mars that maybe we all don't. He said, I think the fundamental question is that Mars was a lot like Earth 4 billion years ago when life first formed. So if it happened here, did it happen there? It would be evident somewhere in the geologic records. All we need is one fossil for proof. He thinks there could be potentially alien life in the clouds of Venus or on the distant moons of one of our gas giants. Researchers have suggested that there could be microbial life in the clouds of Venus because of the presence of ammonia, which on Earth is a key indicator of aquatic life. Aquatic life, eh? Atlanteans? Hadfield on the UAP phenomenon, quote, "We have 7 people living up there. We've been sending people to space since I was born. I spent half a year off planet looking everywhere. It makes no sense at all that intelligent life somewhere from not our solar system could cross interstellar space and just sneak around and only be caught on some strange video by fighter pilots. It just doesn't pass any basic sniff test or logic. It's fun, it's exciting, but if you use reason, the whole argument falls apart." End quote. Okay, Chris Hadfield, keep your secrets from now, you polite Canadian you. Wait till people start looking into Paul Hellyer, another very polite Canadian with some secrets of his own. Until then, you keep distracting us up there with that guitar, Chris. I see you, Jake Sully. Number 2, Michael Collins. NASA veteran and the very first driver up there, Mr. Michael Collins himself served as command module pilot on the historic Apollo 11 mission in 1969. When Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin walked on the moon for the very first time, saying those very first famous lines we all know so well, Collins was back parking that thing up there. Mr. Collins stayed up there by himself in lunar orbit waiting for the safe return of his crewmates. I can't even stay in a basement with the lights off by myself. Imagine being up there just drifting in the currents of matter, like being in the middle of the ocean. Yeah, no way, dude. The astronaut retired from NASA in 1970 and spent his free time answering questions on Twitter. Apparently, he has gotten some really interesting buzz. Mr. Collins invited the interweb to chat, saying, quote, "Are we alone? Hashtag Ask Michael Collins." And boy oh boy, did he get some responses. Everything from wackos who like aliens to very, very high-ranked generals and pilots who are apparently also wackos who like aliens for talking about this. Collins, quote, "I used to think that NASA sent me to the wrong place, to the moon, because I think Mars is a much more interesting place," end quote. Collins has talked about it in the past about the possibility of alien life existing beyond Earth and doesn't shy away from discussing the topic in full. In 1999, for instance, he even argued on the topic of life developing in other parts of this infinite cosmos. So maybe it has then. He wrote in his book saying, quote, "I am alone now. Truly alone, and absolutely isolated from any known life. Although I may feel like I'm the same person, I also feel that I am different from other people. I have been places and done things you simply would not believe." Collins circled the moon once every 2 hours. What's scarier, walking on an unknown rock that apparently no one's ever visited, or flying all the way around it by yourself in the pitch black with no communications? Collins achieved the rank of Major General. He left NASA in 1970 to join the State Department and later became director of the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum in Washington. One of the most key players in this whole thing. Michael Collins sadly passed in 2021. Number 1, Buzz Aldrin. Of course, the poster child for the whole phenomenon itself, Mr. Edwin Eugene Aldrin Jr. American astronaut, engineer, fighter pilot with a doctorate of science and astronautics. This guy is overqualified, okay? 3 spacewalks in 1966, Gemini 12 mission in 1969, Apollo 11 mission. He and mission commander Neil Armstrong were the first 2 people to land on the moon. Quote, "There was something out there, close enough to be observed. What could it be?" According to Aldrin, on Apollo 11 to the moon, quote, "I observed a light out the window that appeared to be moving alongside us. What could that have been other than a spacecraft from another country or another world? It was either the rocket that had separated from us or the 4 panels that moved away when we extracted the lander, right?" After he returned from his missions, he was convinced he saw aliens while he was out there. Credentials aside, he took a lie detector test, people, which he passed with flying colors. In an interview with C-SPAN Buzz, he talked about the future potential of Earth's moon for humanity. He added a little extra info that might have gained the spark to go back, regarding a certain monolith on a moon. Quote, "Visit the moon Phobos of Mars. There's a monolith there, a very unusual structure on this little potato object that goes around Mars once in every 7 hours. When people find out about that, they're gonna say, who put that there? And you bet, Buzz, I'll be the first one to ask that." Number 5, Al Worden. American test pilot, engineer, and NASA astronaut Alfred Merrill Worden was the module pilot for the Apollo 15 lunar mission in 1971. One of the 24 people who have flown to the moon. Woohoo! He's got a couple of firsts though. He orbited it 74 times in the command module. He was the first to drive a moon car. After Apollo 15 reached lunar orbit and his crewmates departed, and Worden spent 3 days alone in his module. That's terrifying. Traveling the furthest out from any other human. After he returned, the crew and him became involved in a NASA controversy, however. Not over leaked alien info, but over postage stamps they had taken to the moon. Yeah, big no-no apparently. They were reprimanded by NASA and did not fly in space again. Worden remained at NASA until 1975, then entered a private sector. And then it gets weird. On a British television morning show, Al Worden started talking about some interesting stuff. They asked him, "Why should we keep going back to the moon?" He paused and replied, "Survival. Survival of our species." Worden also rejected the notion that humans could colonize planets within our solar system, calling them unsustainable. Then he claims he knows where to find habitable planets. When pressed on aliens if he believes them or not, he said, "Yes. You know, I've been asked that question hundreds of times. Yeah, we are the aliens though. We just think there's somebody else. But we were the ones who came from somewhere else because somebody else had to survive. They got in their little spaceship and they came here and they landed and they started civilization here. And if you don't believe me, go get books on the ancient Sumerians and see what they have to say about it. They'll tell you right up front." End quote. Okay, when you hear an astronaut say that, kinda jarring. Number 4, Roswell. As always, if you dig what we do here on Top 5 Scary, make sure you hit that like button. Birth of the UAP phenomenon. 1945, the US's first nuclear explosion. 1946, first underwater nuclear explosion. 1947, the first crash flying saucer. Coincidence? I think not. Especially since they've been known to hover around nuclear bases. Probably for the better. Humans are kind of the worst. Local rancher Mac Brazel finds the wreckage on his property in Lincoln County, New Mexico. Sheriff Wilcox shows RAAF's commanding officer Colonel Blanchard the materials, and during the night, the Air Force combs the entirety of the property, apparently harboring 2 small injured alien bodies. Taking them, of course, to Kirtland Air Force Base, New Mexico that night. And the very next morning, the Roswell Air Force makes a statement claiming they have recovered a crashed flying disc in local newspapers. Boom! History, baby! Photographs of Jesse Marcel, the head intelligence officer who investigated and recovered some of the debris. The very next day, the Army retracts their statement and all of a sudden, a high-altitude weather balloon. Can you believe that, huh? AKA the birth of a conspiracy theory. Nuclear fission explosions, weather balloons. Something's not adding up here. Number 3, Edgar Mitchel. Edgar Dean Mitchell was a U.S. Navy officer, aviator, test pilot, engineer, NASA astronaut, and of course, a ufologist. Ufology is the pseudo term for somebody who studies the UFO phenomenon. I don't think there's a degree you can get that in. If so, I'm signing up. What school? What school, sorry? He was the lunar module pilot of the Apollo 14 in 1971 and spent 9 hours working on the lunar surface. He was the 6th person to walk on the moon. Yeah, he was walking while Worden was up there drifting in the currents of space. Mitchell publicly expressed his opinions and that he was sure that there were thousands of UFOs recorded since the early 1940s belonging to other planets. Thousands. Dateline NBC conducted an interview with Mitchell in 1996. He talked about meeting with officials from 3 different countries who claimed that they had met extraterrestrials in person. Quote, "The evidence for alien contact was very strong and classified by governments, who were covering up visitations and existence of alien bodies in places such as Roswell, New Mexico." Mitchell's book, The Way of the Explorer, discusses his journey. In 2004, he told the St. Petersburg Times that the US government was studying alien bodies and that this group had specifically stopped briefing US presidents since the 1960s. He said, quote, "We all know that UFOs are real. Now, the question is, where do they come from?" In 2008, Mitchell then was interviewed and claimed that Roswell crash was in fact the aliens that had contacted humans several times, but that the government had hidden the truth for more than 60 years. Scary stuff, scary stuff. He sadly passed in 2016. If we just reread the credentials alone, just one more time. Number 2, James McDivitt. James Alton McDivitt is an American test pilot, Air Force pilot, engineer, and NASA astronaut who flew in both the Gemini and Apollo programs. After graduating first in his class with a Bachelor of Science degree in Aeronautical Engineering, he qualified as a test pilot at the Air Force. In 1962, McDivitt was selected by NASA for the Gemini 4 mission. In 1965, he saw, filmed, and photographed an object which approached the Gemini 4 as they were orbiting Earth. Over Hawaii, a craft of some sort. The UFO had a long arm sticking out of it. Here's what Major James McDivitt said. "I was flying with Ed White. He was sleeping at the time, so I don't have anybody to verify this story, but we were drifting in space when suddenly an object appeared in the window. It's a cylindrical object, white. It had a long arm that stuck out of the side. The film was sent back to NASA and reviewed by some NASA film technicians. One of them selected what he thought was what they were talking about, at least before I had the chance to review it, and it was not the picture. It was a picture of a sun reflection on the window. So what were the pictures that he was talking about? In 1975, McDivitt said, "I never made a big deal out of it. It was something I definitely couldn't identify. It looked like a beer can with a pencil sticking out of it. Yeah, I would eventually give up on that too if those were my credentials and people were like, yeah, right, James." When somebody has like 25 years of designing and flying space shuttles around, when they say, "Hey guys, I'm seeing something up here," it's not like, "Oh, James, clean those old specs, would ya? Yuck, yuck." Houston, we have a problem. And number 1, Gordon Cooper. Leroy Gordon Cooper Jr., an American aerospace engineer, test pilot, U.S. Air Force pilot, and the youngest of the 7 original astronauts in Project Mercury, the first human space program in the United States. You know the pictures. It looks like they're wearing a tinfoil suit, you know? Old school, old school. After service as a fighter pilot in World War II, he qualified as a test pilot in 1956 and then was selected as an astronaut in 1959. In 1963, Cooper piloted the longest and last Mercury spaceflight, Mercury Atlas 9. 34 hours in space. The first American to spend an entire day in space, the first person to sleep in space, and the last American launched on a solo orbit mission. In Cooper's autobiography, Leap of Faith, co-authored by Bruce Henderson, he recounted his experiences with the Air Force and NASA and an alleged UFO conspiracy. Cooper claimed to have seen his first UFO while flying over Germany, then saw them land in a dry lake bed. Cooper claimed up until his death that the US was indeed covering up UFOs. He said that there were hundreds of reports made by his fellow pilots, many coming from the military pilots on radar. In his memoirs, Cooper wrote that he had seen unexplained aircrafts tons in his career, and that in 1978 he actually testified before the United Nations on the topic. He sadly passed in 2004. He was such a strong advocate for disclosure, and all of these astronauts are remembered as putting their neck and name out on the line for some truth. But I mean, those UFO enthusiasts, huh? They're all wackos, right? Right?
Number 5. They say in space, no one can hear you scream. But what about a knocking? China's first man in space, Yang Liwei, might be able to tell you what the sound of a man screaming in space sounds like. The taikonaut, the term for an astronaut from China's space program, first visited the stars on a maiden voyage in 2003. While up there, soaring the cosmos, Liwei reported hearing something knocking on the spaceship's hull. He said it didn't sound like it was coming from inside the ship, but it didn't sound like it was coming from the outside of it either. Now, normally, you're not really supposed to hear, anything in space, so this was out of the norm. Liwei went to peer out the porthole just to confirm that there were no goblins or gremlins hanging on the outside of the hull ripping up nuts and bolts, and says he didn't see anything of any note outside causing the sound, which he claims sounded like someone banging on an iron bucket with a hammer. Now where it gets really interesting is that other taikonauts on the Shenzhou 6 and 7 spacecrafts in 2005 and 2008 both reported hearing the exact same phenomenon. One could be a coincidence, one can be explained off. But 3 separate occurrences of hearing something knocking on the ship's hull? Could it be something related to the shuttle's construction? Or is there something haunting the Shenzhou spacecrafts? Wait. Do you hear that? That knocking? It sounds like a transmission coming from inside the studio. Something, a voice telling me that you should subscribe to Top 5 Scary Videos for the best scary videos on the web. strange. I don't know what it means. Sorry, let's move on. Number 4. Now we know space is silent. I'd say no one can hear you scream, but I literally just used the alien joke on the last point, and I've hit my quota for 80s movies references already, and we're not even halfway through the list. I think the silence of the stars would drive me absolutely nutty. I don't know how I'd handle the quiet. I'd need something in my ears. In 1969, a triumvirate of 3 astronauts claimed they heard something pierce the silence. Apollo 10 astronauts Tom Stafford, Gene Cernan, and John Young, while on the surface of the moon, were photographing craters, making memories, that sort of thing, when all 3 of them unanimously claimed they had heard something ethereal on their headsets, claiming that they had heard a sound that was strange, melodic, and composed and otherworldly. All of them described it as music. Now, it's worth noting that it was 1969, so there was no chance that someone accidentally had just left an Aphex Twin album inside the ship's CD player. Commander Cernan said at the time, "We're gonna have to find out about this because no one is going to believe us. Don't worry. Just like the Ghostbusters, we're ready to believe you." And look at that, I snuck in another 80s movie reference without you even noticing. So what exactly was the crew listening to? Could it have just been something malfunctioning on the ship? Feedback from some equipment somewhere? Or could it have been some extraterrestrial entity trying to contact them, or getting caught on the airwaves? Now, some speculate radio interference, but not everyone buys the official story, and NASA has never given an official answer. The biggest question remains, though, is what does space music sound like? If I had to guess, I'd say probably like Grimes' music. I think that's what moon men are listening to. Number 3. When you think of an alien, what do you picture? A little gray thing with big black eyes peering out at you from a flying saucer? Maybe a regular looking man with pointy ears and a strong brow? Maybe a noble warrior with a cool energy sword? Point is, you probably picture something a bit bipedal because of sci-fi depictions. But it doesn't have to be that way. What about a snake? Space snakes. Why does it have to be space snakes? Dr. Story Musgrave has 6 degrees as a physician, former astronaut, and consultant for the Imagineers at Disneyland. Dr. Story Musgrave sounds like a completely fake man who has one of the coolest names ever, but he is very real, and he has one of the most impressive resumes on the planet. He can also boast that he's been to space on 6 separate occasions and has seen things you wouldn't believe. In a 1994 interview, Musgrave spoke out about coming into contact with something he believes to be extraterrestrial. He said, "I've seen a snake out there, 6-7 feet long. It's rubbery and it follows you for a rather long period of time. The more you fly in space, the more you see an incredible amount of living things out there. And that sort of thing brings to you a certainty that other living creatures are out there." Now, skeptics have dismissed this, of course, saying Musgrave just saw a hose or a loose bit of debris or something, but Musgrave insists that the entity he saw had its own method of propulsion and was following him around directly. He said he saw this creature on 2 separate occasions. Maybe it remembered him. Obviously, Musgrave is considered to be fairly reputable as far as NASA astronauts go, and I mean, if Disney trusts him, he must be pretty reputable. So it seems unlikely that he would tell a tall tale. When asked directly what he thought he saw up there, Musgrave said, "Living creatures far more developed as civilizations. They've been around for 100 million years, and we can't even conceive how advanced they are and the kind of things they're doing. That's why I make an effort to communicate. And I might be considered eccentric because I do, but I do tell them to come and get me." And you know what? Thank you, Musgrave. I'm glad someone is willing to be the spokesperson for aliens. Maybe offer them a ticket to Space Mountain. They might feel right at home at that. Or they might be very offended, I'm not sure. Number 2. Many who go to space see bizarre things that they can't explain. And yet many space travelers don't speak out about what they see, for fear of reprimandation, of being deemed nothing more than a tinfoil hat wearing loon. Russian cosmonaut Major General Vladimir Kovalyonok said on the matter, "Many cosmonauts have seen phenomena which are far beyond the experiences of Earthmen. For 10 years, I never spoke on such things." Well, let's take a listen to his story. In 1981, while orbiting outside of the Salyut station, Major Kovalyonok was exercising when he saw something traveling outside the station alongside the porthole. He claims he saw something outside the porthole that was an object he could not explain. He said it was something floating that looked a bit like a barbell, except it was transparent, and it looked like it had had something inside of it. He said he saw gas discharging out of it, like it was reacting. He insists that whatever he saw wasn't artificial, and that it moved in a way that suggested life. He said he saw it tightening and pulsating like an organ. He described the entity as being impossible within the laws of physics. As he was observing it, it combusted spontaneously in an incandescent ray of golden light. Seconds later, a golden explosion followed behind it, and 2 spheres of golden light appeared, which Kovalyonok described as beautiful. After the explosions, there was a white smoke and a cloud-like sphere, and as the station orbited around Earth's shadow, the spheres never returned. Unlike a lot of his peers, Kovyonyuk was very willing to speak out on his experience about what he saw. There was a small investigation into the possibility that it could have been a missile test or a weapons test of some kind, but no conclusive answers were ever found. Whatever he saw, we may never get the truth. And to my Russian viewers, I am so sorry for that pronunciation. Number 1. Major Gordon Cooper is an American astronaut of some renown. The first astronaut to spend a full 24 hours in space, and the last American to spend a fully solo orbital mission. A renowned, reputable astronaut, he's very insistent about life beyond the stars. Near the end of a 22-hour trip around the planet in 1963, he claims that while ending orbit and returning home, he saw a glowing green ethereal orb following him approaching his capsule. The entity was even picked up by a tracking radar in Australia. And yet bizarrely, when he landed, reporters from NBC told him that they were barred from questioning him about the sighting and experience at all. This wouldn't even be Cooper's first experience with UFOs. In 1951, while on an Air Force mission flying over Western Germany, Cooper claimed to have seen metallic saucers flying in ways that would outmaneuver any American spacecraft. He said, "I believe these extraterrestrials and their crews are visiting this planet. Most astronauts are reluctant to discuss UFOs." Listen to this other quote from Cooper. "In the USA, every day our radar instruments capture objects of form and composition unknown to us. And there are thousands of witness reports and a quantity of documents to prove this. But nobody wants to make them public. Why? Because authority is afraid that people may think of God knows what kind of horrible invaders. We have to avoid panic by all means." Now, it sounds like Cooper is alluding to a cover-up. Gordon Cooper isn't just some nut on the street barking out to whoever will listen, but a respected, experienced sailor of the stars. So is this why most stories of UFOs get buried? And astronauts who speak out about it are all labeled as sensationalists? All because NASA thinks that people can't handle it? I think we're ready. I think the stories are starting to come out there. The truth is out there. And we will find it. Number 5. Bones on Mars. We are just desperate to find some proof of there being life on Mars. More than anything, we just want to know if there's anybody else out there with us. We want to know if there's aliens coming in from other galaxies, but I think more importantly, we want to look in our own solar system first. It'd be an awfully lonely galaxy otherwise. And while we haven't had a manned mission yet to Mars, thanks to telescopes and rovers, we've been able to get a pretty good look at the surface of it to better our understanding. Recently, a photo taken from the Curiosity rover reignited the search, and alien enthusiasts were excited when it looked like a photo of a human bone was taken from the surface of Mars. It shows a collection of rocks, half buried in dust, and one in particular immediately jumps out, looking like a femur bone, even possibly a human femur bone. However, excitement dwindled pretty soon when, like most cases, like the face on Mars and that statue that looked like it might have been a human woman on Mars, it turned out to be little more than a coincidence. The bone? Well, it turns out it's not much more than a rock that just happens to look like a bone, and our eyes and desire to see patterns where there aren't patterns can trick us all. It was shaped through erosion caused by the wind. Now, NASA is more than aware how much we're all jumping at the bit for proof of aliens, so they even issued a statement about this picture. If life ever existed on Mars, scientists expect that it would be small, simple forms called microbes. Mars likely never had enough oxygen in its atmosphere to support more complex organisms. Thus, large fossils are not likely. Now, it does bear mentioning too that the rock bone actually doesn't look, exactly like a human femur when you really look at it, but hey, that's probably why we thought it was an alien, after all. And if you're looking for more scary stuff from outer space, aliens, cryptids, SCPs, and way, way, way more, basically everything scary under the sun, toss a subscribe our way and stay spooked all night long. Number 2, cracking the glass. It must be so odd being in space, floating around in all that nothingness. Even weirder on a space station. You're out in the vast, unending cosmos, and you know that the only thing that's keeping you alive is being inside this box, and that the environment around you cannot support you at all. And you are lost in a sea of stars, very, very, very far away from home. I'm not sure how you could ever get used to calling that home. I've got nothing but respect for the astronauts on the ISS. That stuff would stress me out so much I don't think I'd ever get a good night's sleep. I would be way too worried at all times that all it would take is one little thing to go wrong and it would all be over. Well, the ESA, that's the European Space Agency, tweeted a photo out a little bit ago of a crack in the window of the ISS, which is a nail-chomping sight. The damage was caused by a floating piece of debris that collided into the observatory observatory of the ISS. The chip that did this damage was only about 1/4 of an inch. And while it looks incredibly unnerving, and if I saw it while I was serving in the space station, I would probably sweat bullets, the ESA reassures everyone that the damage doesn't actually pose a threat. Now, the unnerving part to me is that they speculate that the object that damaged the window could have been something as small as a flake of paint that came off the ISS and collided with the window. A flake of paint did that! If your first thought was, well, what about something ever so slightly larger, the ESA has the same worry, and has said that a piece of debris larger than 4 inches would be enough to completely shatter a satellite or a spacecraft wide open. That would probably prevent me from ever getting a good night's sleep, knowing that there's always a possibility something tiny could tear a hole open and have everyone sucked into space. Sweet dreams! The threat of space debris is a growing concern for NASA and the ESA and other space organizations, as debris keeps getting lost up there and isn't getting taken away. Nobody's taking out the cosmic trash. We've already messed Earth up pretty bad. It would be a galactic embarrassment if we trash up the stars. So next time they send some astronauts up there, bring a dirt devil or something. Maybe vacuum something up. Do your part. Number 3, dying star. When you're looking at a star, you're actually looking at a star as it was about 4,000 years ago. It's kind of out of date by the time you saw it. The speed of light, very, very fast, but it's not that fast. You see, stars live for hundreds upon millions of years, so when we're looking at them, they're practically an infant in the cosmic sense. But have you ever wondered what it might look like when a star does die? When a star finally croaks and kicks that celestial bucket? Well, thanks to billions of dollars in telescope technology, we can scratch that curiosity. Before the James Webb Telescope stomped onto the scene and stole the hearts and mind of the space community, the Hubble telescope was still the #1 name to trust in the big telescope community. It was capturing all sorts of dazzling and delightful images, including this lovely one of the star CW Leonis, captured as it was dying. Oh, and nobody did anything to help. You just watched it. Oh, these people. Have you ever seen a dying star? I definitely haven't, and it is as ethereally beautiful as I could have imagined, but also like wildly scary in a sort of cosmic horror way, you know, and that sort of we're so small in the galaxy kind of way. It looks like a cosmic web, kind of like a fractal galactic spider web, and that's a great album name if you want to give that out there. It looks to me like staring into the eye of a Lovecraftian god, some being that's existed before the dawn of time. Makes me feel like I'm gonna get driven to just a little bit of madness if I stare at it too long. So I'm not a rocket scientist, or a scientist, or really even that smart about anything, but I could do my best to try and explain what's going on here. The cobwebs that you can see floating around the star are carbon absorbing the dying star, and the outer layers of the star are being sucked into the black void of space. And where that goes from there, could not tell you, but it's probably just as terrifying to even consider. Anyway, can't tell you too much more. Like I said, I'm no scientist. I'm just a reasonably charismatic YouTube host who can tell you when something looks cool. And this star looks pretty cool. Jack-o'-lantern sun. Hey, it's not just people who can dress up for Halloween. We've all seen dogs in hilarious Halloween costumes, and now even the stars want to get in on the celebrations. NASA's Solar Dynamics Observatory captured a fascinatingly spooky looking image of our beloved celestial body, the sun, on October 8th of 2022, taking a photo of the sun seemingly wearing a Halloween costume of a jack-o'-lantern for the season. Just beautiful, really. Now, again, I'll do my best to explain what's happening here, but I'll be completely candid. I'm just writing down some words that I read on a NASA website, and I'm not 100% that I actually know what any of these mean, but I'll say them anyway for you. The active regions are areas of greater light and energy that appear in SDO images to flame outwards from the sun. This image has been edited slightly to highlight the ultraviolet active regions, since our regular eyes can't see ultraviolet light that easy. Does this mean this is what the sun has been looking like this entire time, and I just don't have the insight to know about the face on the sun? NASA shared this particularly festive image with the title Pumpkin Sun, and I think it's pretty easy to see where they're coming from in this one. This one straight up looks like just a giant cosmic jack-o'-lantern. The lights form 2 eyes, it's got a little nose and a wide, jagged, smiling mouth. Kinda makes it seem like there was a giant cosmic pumpkin carving contest out there in the skies. I kinda wish we could get this permanent for like the months of October. Would love to look up in the sky and I see a giant face staring back at me like I live in Clocktown from Majora's Mask. Yeah, this isn't the scariest point on this list, I can admit that, but it's a darn good photo and I think that's worth showcasing enough, is it not? And I mean, really, imagine looking up into the sky and seeing that looking back at you. I feel like you would assume it was the end of days and it was gonna start raining fire down upon the heavens. And number 1, that's no moon. Now what you're looking at right now is a picture of Saturn's moon Mimas. And I know what you're thinking. thinking, that's no moon, that's a space station. As the moon Mimas is a dead ringer for the fully operational mobile star crusher, the Death Star. An asteroid crater left in the side of the giant rock has left it permanently looking like the infamous Imperial Space Station. Now, while something looking like the Death Star is more than interesting enough to me, what's truly interesting here is that astronomers believe they might have found proof that this Death Star, ironically, might be hiding a bit of life beneath its surface, hiding an ocean just under the satellite's crust. Recently, researchers studying Mimas have discovered that there is a strange wobble effect in the moon's rotation, and research data has shown and suggested that the wobble is caused by the sloshing of liquid ocean just beneath the icy surface of the 246-mile diameter moon, big moon. Now, if this is true, this would be huge shakes. Water on any other planet is very exciting since, you know, not to speculate too wildly, it could be proof of life on another planet. Even small and microbial would still be an earth-shattering revelation since it would count as alien life. Since this discovery, scientists are starting to look at Mimas differently, since if this was true, it could mean this hunk of rock is a whole new type of world altogether. The possibility that it can sustain life and that our solar system might be a little more occupied than we'd previously thought, well, that would change everything. That's all we've been looking for in any of these videos, proof of alien life somewhere. Now, as far as I can tell, it doesn't look like Mimas has a giant laser capable of destroying a planet, so it's a fair bit nicer than the real Death Star, and hopefully they didn't make the same engineering mistakes and there's no structural ports or, oh, what was it called? No, I'm embarrassing myself as a Star Wars fan. What he shot the torpedo into. We all know what I'm talking about. When Luke shot the torpedo in, it doesn't have that. That's what I'm trying to get at. Anyway, hopefully there is something hiding beneath that ice. I feel like that'd be a pretty good cosmic twist if we spent all this time thinking Mars is going to be where we found the aliens, and then it turns out it's the Death Star, the thing from Star Wars where we find our alien friends. That's poetry.